pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Let's call the order. Roll call.
Chris? Here.
Now we all know who we are. Yeah. Alcina, you're taking notes?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we're all set there. Any adjustments to the agenda?
I just have one little announcement, not a big deal.
Yeah, sure. We'll do that in a second. And then, minutes from the October 28th.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Thank you very much. Okay, Chris, why don't we'll just stick you in with that little, you said.
Some weeks ago, or meetings ago, we had talked about just making sure that we haven't lost touch totally with the Atlantic Salmon Foundation. And I had a nice talk with John Burrows, who's Miranda's replacement. And they know we're there, they know we're working. They said, when you guys get around to talking fish, we're always happy to visit with you. So
Okay.
just so we've not lost touch.
What does Miranda's replacement mean? Okay,
Yeah, she really ran that project. She was the Atlantic Salmon Federation coordinator. And so she moved on and her replacement is a fellow named John Burrows. He's a nice guy. Probably not as nice as she was, but a nice guy.
All right. Okay, don't put that. All right.
it's recorded.
It's recorded. Okay, funding source update. Do we have it?
Not really. I have some thoughts. When we talk about some of the other things, but no, I don't have any update.
Okay, that's not unexpected. All right, so.
Can I interrupt one quick? I assume we're at the same place we were the last meeting in that there is very limited, and for that email, there's very limited funds available.
Oh, well, if we want to have just a general discussion about funds and not any update on any activity. I mean, Chris sent that document, forgive me, I don't remember it, but I remember with page 27 and the thing that I mean, it was a report card from some group of engineers about all the infrastructure in the state of Maine, and dams get like a D- or a D+ or something. And it says very clearly, there are limited funds available to just fix dams. And I think we all knew that.
Yeah.
You know, just trying to find somebody to say, here, just fix it, probably isn't gonna happen. We have to have something to go with it. But if we're talking about that, interestingly, I have a cousin who is very involved with the activity with the dams in Bucksport, Orland, those 5 dams that AIM wants to give up that used to belong to the Bucksport mill. Their situation is different, never was hydro, and they have 500 and something people that have camps on Toddy Pond. So lots of people have lots of interest in keeping that body of water. But interestingly, and I suspect not an option for us, they're actually doing private fundraising. GoFundMe, you know, hey, save our ponds.
That's interesting.
Town of yeah, it is kind of interesting, but you are also talking about 500 people who have homes or camps worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Therefore, they are willing to invest in that. Our situation is that we have a handful of people who are directly on the impoundment, which isn't to say that more people than not voted to keep the impoundment. I don't know that our situation warrants a GoFundMe to see if we can.
And I'm also presuming, usually dams they're damming up a pond are a lot smaller and not nearly as complex as what we have to. So maybe, and who knows, the dam might not be in as bad a shape as ours. So yeah, but thank you for
Anyway,
that.
so it's sort of. a
Before you go away, you had sent an email saying that you knew of Atlantic Salmon, I think, who had funded a dam. at the
Well,
state,
okay.
And you want to go talk with them?
I think it would be really interesting to talk to this Brandon Kulik,
Yeah.
who is with Kleinschmidt. His expertise, from what I could find on Facebook and LinkedIn, is fisheries. But again, it's kind of nice to have somebody else going through something similar because he and I are now sharing ideas. But they invited this gentleman from Kleinschmidt to come and do a presentation to them for the Branch Pond Dam. It's in Palermo, so it's part of the Sheepscot River thing. But the Atlantic Salmon Federation was involved, and they did fix the dam, not tear it out, and they did build a fishway.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. And with the sort of the hook was for recreation in that Branch Pond body of water. Not that big, 2 miles long. So it's not unheard of for them to find a way to participate. And I thought it might be interesting if we could, if it's okay, I'd even call this guy
May I
and see
suggest,
what he would say.
may I suggest that we ask Sandra to do that?
Yeah, yeah,
Follow up with
absolutely.
that.
I mean, at this point, any fishing pole that is available,
Yeah.
cast and see if we can
Thank you.
get it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought it was pretty interesting that somebody at Kleinschmidt, despite the words in their report, which is the next item on our agenda anyway,
Yeah.
did participate in one that kept a dam.
Yeah.
And so,
And I suspect that conservation groups, and including Atlantic Salmon, that's not unheard of, even outside of Maine. That is not their preference.
correct,
So they're going to, that's not gonna be something to offer up. But then if it's clear that the dam's gonna be kept,
they might come
they
back.
might come back.
I suspect that maybe.
Especially if it's gonna be the difference between, the budget fishway and the one that they want. They might be willing to
Yeah.
upgrade us, so, yeah, exactly. All right, very good. Thank you very much, Sandy. All right, before we get on to our A, B, C, D, and E, I'll just say that we're under tight time constraints, so we're going to, all on you. We're gonna go through this as quickly as possible, and,
Okay, so, what's our cutoff for these funding source updates? Funding sources, like, because.
We don't even know.
Politics in it, because you have a new administration coming in, and those fundings could be a lot different when. months
Until
from
we,
now.
until we have a plan, it's just gonna be gather as much information as we can, and then when we have a plan, we'll see what we can fit into it. I will say, a quick update for people who've been interested from our prior meeting we had, or 2 meetings ago, the possibility of someone interested in the dam for hydro. We are going to proceed as if we never heard that, because there's any number of ways that we conspire against that happening, and we can't afford to count on anything. So we're just gonna, the select board is going to be in contact with them. So if anything happens, we'll bring it back to the board. But for just all intents and purposes, for our purposes, we didn't hear that.
But the select board is going to look at
Oh,
least
yeah,
ask for an update. Okay.
There is some contact going on, but it's so preliminary and so speculative. Yeah, way too early. But just to let you all know that we are not going to hear anything about it unless something happens. Well, we don't need, our group does not need to make it happen. It's going to be happening
Okay.
or not happening in the background. Okay, excellent. All right, well, let's get to the Kleinschmidt report. Chris, did you want to
No,
summarize?
actually, you have somebody here from Kleinschmidt?
Okay, excellent.
Could you introduce them and Steve, I'll just leave him?
Yeah.
Okay. Who's with us tonight?
Hey, this is Andrew Holt here from Kleinschmidt. I'm a mechanical engineer and did kind of the bulk of the writing on the report here. Kevin Cooley's here with me as well. I'll give him a chance to introduce himself.
Yeah,
We-
good
we
evening.
see both-
Yeah.
both of you. We have a lot of questions. Very specific questions that anybody's got. I have some, Bill, I know you've got some.
Yeah.
Bill,
I would say just jump right in.
Bill, jump in, okay?
In looking at the numbers that you have a caveat in the discussion about Fishway and Fishway being a separate piece, so we'll put that to the side. The
Sure.
numbers that you come up with are in the range of $5.5 million. Is that what I would call a total project cost, a full cost, or is that just for the specific items you listed with no overhead burden and other costs associated with it?
That would be our total cost. Yeah. So our task here was to review, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with the scope, but just to, refresh anybody that may not be as familiar, our scope was to take a look at the Gomez and Sullivan report that had been prepared. There were two reports, one dam safety assessment and one pre-feasibility study back in October of 23. So our scope was to review the costs they had come up with and provide commentary and adjustments if needed. So that's what's reflected in the memo and the summary that we have regarding costs. And so what we did there was take a look at their numbers. To your point or your question, it didn't seem like there was a contingency applied. They had stated that, but just the numbers still seemed a little low given that statement. So we added some contingency, made some recommended adjustments based on some high-level quantity takeoffs, and also added in the engineering and the permitting costs that would typically be associated with this work. So yes, this would be a total cost, and we've taken work by others and made some recommendations to make that a complete cost. And again, to your point, that does not include the Fishway. I'd spoken with Jack about that, but wanted to stay within the confines of this scope with just the powerhouse remediation and the dam safety repairs.
You're saving $5.5 million, except for the Fishway. Let's spitball and say 2.5 to 3 million for the Fishway, give or take, whatever it is. It might be 2 million, but if we wrote a check or had money in the bank now for 5.5 million, we could execute that project of repairing the dam, powering up the powerhouse, putting in a 300 kilowatt turbine, going through all of the FERC licensing issues, going through all of the fish studies that would have to be done and monitoring that would have to be done, all of the biological activity, the BA, the EA, environmental work that would have to be done, and also water quality work. It seems like there are several things that are missing from this that if we wrote a check for 5.5 million, we would be seriously short. I realize some of that is beyond the remit of the scope of the job you have, and I respect that. I think you've mentioned that in there. But it looks like there are a whole series of other costs that the town would incur if the town was to go forward with a project using this $5.5 million number as the base to say, 5.5 million, we're ready to go. Boom, get the check. Is that a fair statement?
I would say so. I think given the level of the OPCC, so typically we class these 1 through 5. I would most certainly call this a class 5, and there's an official definition for that. But I think off the top of my head, that's somewhere between, I think you could be somewhere as much as maybe 5% developed in your design, like a conceptual level, and then your margin for error is pretty wide. So all that's to say, we'd want to. I think the scope here was to review, what's been done and provide some high level commentary. The next step would be to, get into the details and identify all those specific permitting tasks, everything that really needs to happen to be confident in that number. Not to say that we're not confident, but it's high level at this point, and we'd want to, dig into more details to give you a cost that you could write a check for.
And I realize that a 30% contingency on a conceptual project is normal. On a
Yeah,
project where you had a good idea what the costs were, I would assume you'd be in the 15 to 20% range on contingency. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. We had some design documents to review, particularly the Natel design. So I think we were able to evaluate with some pretty good certainty, what their proposal entailed and what their design entailed. On the other hand, the dam repairs and some of the dam remediation tasks, there weren't well-defined design drawings for that, or there really weren't design drawings for that. So I think that's the side of things where it is still conceptual. We certainly did a lot of looking at Google Earth and pictures and photographs that we have from past inspections, to get a good handle on what is needed. But I do think, at least from where we're sitting, the definition of those repairs aren't well defined enough to really, dial a contingency in anymore.
I'm gonna let you go in and I'll jump in.
Okay, Steve Robinson is here, who knows a lot about this stuff, so I hope, Steve, you'll chime in.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
Andrew, can I get you to page 6 of the report?
Sure. Yeah. Do you want me to share my screen here? Would that be helpful?
Oh, we've got,
I think we're okay.
yeah, and you're far enough away from us, we could read it anyway.
So
Gotcha.
we both got copies.
Sure.
Okay. And I have to admit, I really don't have any idea what I'm talking about, so I'm hoping you can enlighten us. Plus, Steve, who does know what he's talking about, probably wants to chime in. The 3.0 near the top of your 6 potential repowering arrangements, you end up thinking about 1,400, is that right, in 26 megawatt hours as our base, is that correct? Something like that?
We ended up, so what we used for our numbers was the lower proposal from Natel with 1,361 megawatt hours a year.
Okay, 1,361.
Yep. And the thought there
then-
was that was what appeared in the application that Natel helped prepare. So that would be the most realistic number.
Okay, the next paragraph is where I really have my question, okay? And I get the sense from reading that paragraph that that 1,361 is a risky number with such a low head dam.
Yes. Yep. That's exactly what that paragraph is trying to say. Especially with the assumption of constant net head. I mean, you guys, I've driven by this dam before, and you guys are more familiar with it than I am. But there's a lot of times in the year where there's not a lot of water in the tailwater, or there is a lot of water in the tailwater, and there's very little head between the head pond and the tailwater. So that was kind of a red flag on our end, as far as the assumption that was made for constant net head. That's the less head you have, the riskier that assumption becomes. Because
Right.
every foot in change in tailwater is a much greater portion of the overall net head. So that was something that stood out to us, and yes.
All right, so am I correct in inferring then that this 1,361 is perhaps optimistic?
Yes.
Okay. Steve, I don't understand the next pieces of this, the guts of this. And so I'm kind of hoping that you can have a discussion with them that helps us all get enlightened what this means.
Yeah. I mean, basically, you're picking a megawatt hour outage based on some flow rate and engineering. I said that's okay. I mean, it's optimistic, it is. And what you folks did is you looked at ISO New England pricing versus net energy billing pricing. And you would use net energy billing at 13 cents a kilowatt hour, basically. And you multiply those together, the megawatt hour output times the kilowatt hour or megawatt price, $135 a megawatt hour. And you're gonna come out with your revenue that supposedly the generator will produce.
And where is that in the document, Steve?
Page 9.
Page 9.
It's the $185,000.
Yeah, $185,000 a year revenue, and then they included $30,000 a year O&M expense. So you're gonna
you're gonna see 185 less your expense of the year will give you $155,000 revenue out of that 300 megawatt generator. So you take the 155,000, and here's where I have a question. Is if you didn't do the hydro at all, and you just restored the dam, you're gonna spend $3.1 million going to this, right?
More.
But yeah, well, okay,
For now.
it's 5.5, you take out 2.5 for the hydro, or 2.4, you end up with 3.1, but let's just say it's $3.1 million to do the dam. Incremental cost to do the hydro would be $2.5 million, 2.4. I would take that against the 155. I wouldn't take the 155 and apply it to the whole 5.5. Because you're gonna spend the 3.1 anyway, whether you have a hydro or not.
On page 10, the two scenarios, and I think we're looking at scenario 3, is that right, Steve?
You're looking at net energy billing.
Right.
Yeah.
And all by itself, we're looking at a payback of how long? Before we ever make money on this?
Well, they're saying 32 years.
And how does that sound to you?
It's the way the analysis is correct. I'm just saying I wouldn't put it against the 5.5 million. I'd put it against the cost of the hydro, the incremental cost of the hydro.
Okay,
That would give you about a 15.5 year payback.
okay, good. Good.
That's the only change I would make.
Okay,
Jack?
Can we just stay on the point of net energy metering just for a second? So you talk about part of, I don't know if everybody understands the, nuances of net energy metering, but you reference in here the need for off takers in order to do net energy metering. Do you guys elaborate on how you need the off taker to realize the revenue?
Sure. Yeah. And Kevin, feel free to chime in here as well. But my understanding is, so you would either, there's two scenarios described in the memo. One would be you have a direct net metering off taker, which in this case could, or most likely would be the mill complex there. During that project, we found some background documents that we had, including a one line for that, showing a transformer, 480 volt transformer from the hydro unit or the future hydro unit to that building. So that would be a direct connection behind the meter. So you'd be behind the mill building's connection to CMP. And so in that case, that would be, like I said, direct net metering. The other thing you could do would be that virtual net metering where you buy a transformer, you pay for the connection to CMP, and then you have an off taker somewhere else on the grid that you arrange that net metering with CMP as opposed to the actual off taker, the physical off taker.
and that number was 100,000 for that connection?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, versus the
Yep.
20. Okay,
So basically in either scenario, the off taker is the one paying the revenue. The off taker's paying for that.
$135.
They're buying the power, they're buying the power, and so, but it's a credit that is received by the owner. It's a credit on electric bills. It's not necessarily cash, right? It's an offset to energy bills that the owner of the facility has. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes. Yep.
another way to put that question is if I, the user, don't use 1,361 kilowatt, whatever.
Megawatt hours.
Thank you. If I don't use it, do I get those credits? I think not, right?
You don't get the $135, you get whatever the current, according to this report, you get whatever the current ISO New England wholesale prices, which is $50 plus.
So if we were to do the direct connection to the mill, town doesn't own it. Does that mean that mill owners, Arnold Development, would either have to pay us? Well, I guess they would have to pay us because it wouldn't be the town, right?
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at under that scenario. Are they the purchaser of the power paying the owner of the hydro facility, i.e. the town, for that electricity? Is that how that would work, or is it? Does all that still somehow flow through CMP, as the supplier? I'm not sure I'm understanding how they, I know how the town offsets, it's billing, because we actually have this current arrangement, put in place. But in terms of if it were supplying the mill, how does the town realize revenue?
I'm not entirely sure on that one. I don't know if you know, Kevin, if the mill would pay them directly or. Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Kevin.
Okay, thanks. I couldn't unmute myself. So if you had a power purchase agreement with the mill, you would essentially be selling, and if it was behind the meter, you'd be selling directly to the mill. They would be paying you for the whatever that agreement was. It may be a little bit different than the 13 cents for net metering, but they would be paying you in more of a cash arrangement or a payment arrangement, as opposed to a credit on other load that the town may use.
And in that scenario, would the town have to somehow become a utility company to sell power? I mean, would we then come under the jurisdiction of PUC and other potentially complicating arrangements?
That's a fair question, and I'm not an expert in that, so I'm not sure that I could answer that. But it's a fair question. It's not much different than, I kind of equate it to the solar. There's a lot of solar development that's being done, and with entities, Revision Energy and others that are developing developing solar and then selling that back to the grid. I don't know that you would become a utility, but again, I'm not an expert in that particular area. More just on developing the hydro, more so than how all the metering happens.
Or an alternative is that we could spend $100,000 and have these credits go directly to the town, correct? Where we're confident that they use more than 1,361 MHWs per year.
Right.
Yes, but what I want to point out is that we already have that arrangement with a solar farm with Revision. So we've allocated our usage to be offset already. So we don't have enough credits. I think it's like 85% of the usage of electricity is already being offset through the Revision solar farm in Skowhegan. So we don't have that to offer this project as an offset. So I know you mentioned in the report, Foxcroft Academy, they have the rooftop solar of the field house that is offsetting, I think, almost, if not all of their electricity. So they're not a candidate to be an off taker. So it would have to be deliberate to figure out who could be the off taker.
I could leave all my lights on. And you will. Thank you. Are there other questions?
Yeah, regarding the direct issue of going direct, I can tell you the mill currently buys power at a price significantly less than $1,335. I can't tell you exactly what the price is, but you can find that out, Jack, if you called up Jonathan and said, if we offered you $135 a megawatt hour, 13.5 cents kilowatt, would you be interested in a long-term contract? I believe, this is my speculation, the answer would be no. Also, the mill does not have that usage of 1,250, 1,300 megawatt hours a year. Their usage is less than that. So, and let's say it's just pick a number, half of that. It might be close to half of it. That means the other half would then, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we had 1,350, I'm going to round it to 14 because it's easy to work with. 700 the mill could use, but then the other 700 would go onto the grid unless you found an off taker willing to pay that other price. You'd only get the $50 a megawatt hour. Is that correct? for the balance. The 700 goes to the mill and you get whatever price they'll give, say, the 1350. But the other 700 of that number, that would go into the grid. If that goes into the grid, according to what I'm reading and what you're saying here, that would go and then go into the ISO New England, and it would be sold at the, whatever the current wholesale price is at the time of the year. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if you can split it. Again, not being an expert in some of that inner workings of the utility, I'm not sure if you can split it. It's you know, my view is it's maybe one or the other. You either have somebody that has a load sufficient to take it all, or you go into the wholesale market. Not the balance goes to the wholesale. But that's my
It's all or
understanding. But that may not be. Yes, that's what I'm suggesting. But I'm not sure if that may take some more research to get to that answer.
No, I believe that that's correct. I know that is true for rooftop solar and whatnot. If you enter into one of those commercial arrangements with revision or whatever, you're behind the meter or nothing.
Correct, for
So,
residential,
right.
yes.
But I mean, I'm pretty sure it's the same rationale, which is it's one or the other. Either you're set up to go into the wholesale or you're set up for behind.
Okay,
meter.
and that's an interesting point. We should clarify if we go further.
Yes, you would, this project, 30 kW, would not go into the ISO New England market. You just wouldn't go that way. It's an option, I understand, but you just wouldn't do that. You do the net energy billing. Understand, energy billing, we're talking apples and oranges a little bit. The contract that you have with the town is buying supply. It's not buying the full delivery, net energy billing rate. At 13 cents, 17 cents, that's supply and delivery. When you get a contract for a solar contract, you're still paying the delivery to CMP, and you're just paying the 8.5, whatever cents, right? For power. So they're apples and oranges, and it's just different.
Are there other questions on the Kleinschmidt contract? Andrew, I guess you guys are available down the road, right?
Yes.
We need you?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else for these guys? Are we happy?
Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah, I think we're all good. Thank you, guys. This was, it was great that you were able to deliver this as quickly as you did. That was really appreciated.
Very useful.
Thank
Okay.
you. Let us
Yeah,
know.
appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now moving on to B, costs and decisions.
Okay, costs and decisions.
Really?
Bill and I worked a lot.
Wait,
What?
this seems like something we've been waiting for months for, and we're just gonna hear some answers and move on. I mean,
Well, that's.
Oh, no, I think you need another piece before we can, before we,
like, wait a minute.
before we.
This
can do
can't
that.
be the end of the discussion.
Oh, no.
Okay,
No.
good.
No, it's just. the
All right, I'm
beginning.
good.
Okay, Bill and I spent a lot of time working up what this feet of numbers means. We have well, this all started, as you know, with the August of 23 Berkeley. They didn't have any numbers. They just say, here's some things you need to worry about. One thing they didn't get a chance to do was get the dam stabilization analysis done. So they had Gomez and Sullivan do that. So that's one set of numbers. Two, later on, Gomez and Sullivan said, what does it take to do power? Which of course gets on to all of this. So that's two sets of numbers. Three sets of numbers. The third set came from one of the options in the dam one work. They had 6 of them, and one of them was just to fix the dam. And I'm sorry, Interflew, the engineering consultant on that project, came up with what it would take to fix the dam. Okay, so that's 3 sets of numbers. And then, of course, we looked to Kleinschmidt for the 4th set of numbers, which gets us to where we are. So we have 4 sets of numbers. And what makes sense? What, after all, is the total of these numbers? So that's what we're going to get into next. And on the screen, the dam remediation only. So if we pass that around. Bill's question was, do we have a turnkey system for 5.5 million,
Turnkey is the right way to describe it.
right? And putting all the numbers together from all three engineering firms, we end up with quite different set of numbers. Plus some work we've done ourselves. So I want to go through these. You skip straight to the bottom line. We are looking for the dam remediation only to be $8.8 million.
This is okay, right?
Oh, of course, all over. And I'll get that on the screen. And let's go through it. Column J is the source. Where did we get this number? And if you look at the bottom, line 83, I stands for Interflu. These are the ones who did all the consulting work for the original plan. Gomez and Sullivan is GS, K is Kleinschmidt, and there's a BC, there's a Bill and Chris.
Yeah.
This is stuff we've talked about. So we want to make sure we got that in there too. Okay, everybody with me so far?
Yep.
All right, now. Everything from line 2 to line 28 is a result of Interflu's numbers. They came up with what they think was a complete set of numbers to repair the dam. No power, but repair the dam. Everybody with me? And a new fishway of sorts. So, if you look at lines 6 and 7, the general deficiency in dam stabilization, the first part of the Kleinschmidt review was really focused on that. Those two items. Then they had some project management, they had some contingency, and that's how they get to their number of 5 million. According to Interflu, there's a lot more. Mobilization, just getting the contracts done, getting the equipment there, all this, and Bill, you've done a lot on that. 605,000, water control, erosion, pest control, and you read down through line 19, including the contingency of 30% for the entire project, which both Interflu and Kleinschmidt agree that at this stage of a project, you ought to be thinking about not 15%. Okay. So they come to just the hard cost, 6,119,000. You notice in the source column that some of those were backed up by Gomez and Sullivan and Kleinschmidt numbers, but you notice a lot of lonely eyes out there. Okay. I think we would be remiss to not take those into consideration. In addition, Interflu also put in the delivery costs, project management, permitting, engineering, the design engineering. At that point, you know what this thing's going to cost you. You can put your contingency down to 10% maybe. Contract administration, construction observation, and Bill made an interesting point. Bank stabilization, when you're done, where is that? We're not quite sure that's in here.
It wasn't in for that particular one, it was in for others. And if you put in a new fishway, for example, if it is a new fishway or vertical slot, it's gonna go all the way down the length of the Mayo Mill building, come out at the very southeast corner. If it does, that corner is getting eaten away. Last year on December 19th, we lost 1.5 feet of bank that's there. So that whole area, if you're gonna put in a couple $1 million fish passage, you're gonna have to make sure that you go and have some bank stabilization along that area.
Which is why this is italicized. All right.
Yeah.
So you're looking at $7,583,000. Okay, which is pretty close to what he had, the Interflu numbers, with some adjustments from Gomez and Sullivan and Kleinschmidt. Now, we've talked about things that the town needs to do in the near term in order to get this to shovel ready. Okay. So we know that there are going to be required some fish and water quality studies, environmental studies. We're going to spend some money on lawyers somewhere along the line. We're going to need somebody to take us through the FERC business, starting with and all the way through the whole project. And then we're going to need some engineering assistance. This gets into sufficient to get us into the FERC approval for whatever our plan is, whether it's redemption or getting rid of it or keeping it. And then I put in a slush number. That's $1.2 million. these are costs that are outside of anything else. This is stuff we've talked about and we think is gonna have to be done. One way or another, we're gonna spend some money. So we're down to $8.8 billion. There's a number. I have a tendency to believe these numbers because there's been 3 engineering firms who've done this stuff before. And if one of them left something out, the other ones might have gotten it in. But this to me strikes me as a reasonable high estimate when we go to the town in February. Okay, now I suspect, I believe, and Bill, I think you agree with me, that it's probably fair when we go to the town to be able to give them a range. So if we take this at the top end, maybe there's some things that we can agree upon that maybe we could say, well, it may not be this much. So I'd like to think that we can come in with a low range. I don't know how much lower it is, but if we looked at these line items, are the things that we could get consensus on that we might be willing to say maybe, and it's enough to, if we total them all up, to give us a low, okay?
And the one question I have about that, and of course, this is just as a reminder, everybody, we're only talking about the expense side, not any potential for offsets coming from, say, Atlantic Salmon Federation or anything. This is just what the cost would be. It would seem from what we've heard that from other projects in Maine, that the and outside of Maine too, that the fishway might be on the low end.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I caveat that when you say that this is kind of at the higher end. If you took the fishway out, I think, like you, I feel that there's a fair amount of confidence that these numbers are in the right home. But it would seem, accepting anything like they get in there to do the stabilization and it's way worse than they thought, that just putting that stuff aside, the fishway seems to be the one that has the most potential swing in the wrong direction.
That's lines 15 and 16. That's
Right.
a total of 840,000. And Bill, you were thinking,
If you go all in based on the way that Mike had done it, it would be 2.5 to 3 million, depending on what we do with
So-
inflation. And that's taking your direct cost mobilization and the like, it's taking your shovel costs, it's taking your contingency, it's taking your overhead. And I can go over that separately with people and show you how we have to work them out. So 2.5 to 3 million, all in turnkey, except for the town overhead costs, which is another million spread over the entire
You're saying
project.
just for the fishway piece.
Yes, for the
That's
fishway piece, and that's
the,
instead of 840,000,
840,000 you've got here, you're saying maybe should be more like,
Well, there is some
200.
sharing of contingency and
there's
engineering.
contingency on top, there's engineering and that, but we can go through what they have. I just tried to break out the numbers that they had, which is what Chris and I were working with, to say, what if you, and you notice how Chris is broken off to the side, the first dam requirements, first powerhouse, and then we have fishway, and that, you know, if you take the fishway, take the contingency, take the portion of the project management, you end up with about 2.5, 3 million, and then you have to inflate it, because that number is not a 2023 number, and by the time we get to it, it's gonna be 2028.
Right.
that's correct. And notice in the lower right, 2 things. These are only $2023. So you need to adjust those. And secondly, there's no landscaping. Nothing looks pretty at the end of this.
Right.
Okay, now that's the dam only. Okay. The next one to hand out is the repower facility only. It assumes that we've fixed the dam. Okay, now what's it take to repower? Again,
I'm struggling here. After all this talk about, we have so many numbers. Do we now have another so many numbers? It's either 8.8 or it's 11, because
Well-
we want to add 2.5 to this?
no, not quite,
No,
not
no,
quite
no,
yet.
for this scenario.
Not quite yet. For this scenario, I think it's fair that whoever's the cheapskate among us, maybe it's me, says, I don't think you need to spend $600,000 on mobilization. You could get by with 500,000. And unless anybody really objects, go through that
Fair
line by
enough.
line. And we end up
No, the one I'm struggling with is it 840,000 or is it 2.2 million?
It's 840,000 to get your shovels out there and shovel it. But in order to get the shovels out there to shovel it, you need to do the engineering, you need to do the permitting, you need to do the construction
And
supervision.
that's not part of these numbers?
That's part of the numbers down below.
Okay.
And I can
See?
take you through how I got
Didn't
that.
understand.
Yeah,
Okay, I get
Yeah.
it.
That's correct.
All right.
yeah, thank you. That was
Now,
good point.
the other piece of this is hydropower. Okay. And again, if you look at column J, the source, the numbers came from either Gomez and Sullivan, their October 2022 report, and revised by Kleinschmidt. So this is the compilation of both. Okay, and we picked the higher number. And those lines are straight out of their material. Replace the turbine for temporary shoring, lines 43 through 48. The interconnection, we talked about the 20,000 that Kleinschmidt said. And if we're gonna do it to the town, if they hadn't already sold it all off, the 100,000.
It'd still be 100,000 if we could find somebody else to offset.
That's correct. And not to double count, when we did the dam, they had 150,000 to take all that out. So I wanna subtract that from this column. And then you have the same thing, direct costs, mobilization, water control, project management, permitting, engineering design, construction, et cetera. And you end up with 3 million, if look way to the right, rounded, it's 3 million too. You put two together, and you're talking about $12 million. And we haven't got a fancy fishway. Steve?
I have the right to ask a question.
Oh, absolutely.
Not this one, the slide before. So what I'm hearing is, Gomez and Sullivan did their numbers. You hired Kleinschmidt to come up and verify the numbers. They did. They came out and said it's $3.1 million to restore the dam. Forget Fishway, just to do the dam, 3.1 million. You guys went and grabbed interflow numbers and a bunch of other stuff, did whatever, and grew it up to about 6.6. So you're telling me that Kleinschmidt missed the number by $3 million?
They didn't have a turn, it's not turnkey.
They what?
Theirs is not turnkey. They did not have, for example, in their number, construction supervision. They did not have in their number, construction observation. They did not have in their number, bank stabilization. They did not have in their number, several things they missed. That's why I asked the question, was that a total cost? That if we went, and the proper word to use is turnkey, and they did not come back and say
So-
turnkey.
So Steve, just to be sure, the scope of work for Kleinschmidt was to go back and look at Gomez and Sullivan report specifically, only. And so they did not go out and try to figure out what all those other costs were. So there was a little bit of communication error. What I take from their answer was, of the things that they were looking at, this is it.
Mhm.
But that wasn't actually what Phil's question was. It was how much will it wind up costing us for everything in the whole project, including things that weren't in their purview?
But I don't personally, I don't trust interflow numbers. I haven't seen them. I don't know all the things. I don't trust them. Because I think they had a cause to make the numbers as high as they could make them for reasons.
Well,
But what you guys have done, I mean, I would look at third-party cover, which I thought that's what Kleinschmidt was giving you was a verification and a validation. And now you're taking it and adding yours.
No,
It's up to you guys. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah,
I'm just
they
saying.
did do the verification of what we had before with the Gomez and Sullivan report. So that's what they did. And that's separate from these other aspects of it.
It would be like a similar, but probably different exercise if we did the same thing with the Interflu report, said, okay, we have all these numbers now from Interflu and get another engineering firm to vet all those and say, okay, we agree that, you know, on these Interflu numbers, these are high, these are low, whatever, and do the same thing. We just limited Kleinschmidt to say, look at Gomez and Sullivan, look at how they calculate revenues, look at the payback periods, look at all their assumptions and tell, you know, give us an opinion on them off your own. But literally, you could do the same thing again with the total project costs and, you know, you guys just took a stab at saying, if we trust the interfluent numbers, and you put those in there, this is what it all stacks out to.
We didn't take a stab, actually. What we did was took the
Took
numbers.
the numbers.
How many
It
years?
seems to me though, if we went to Kleinschmidt, specifically, and maybe I'm wrong, but in my mind, the real question that we had for them was analyze the financials. Is there any circumstance in which this makes financial sense to fix hydro? If they gave us that answer on 5.5 or 2.1, or, I mean, right now, I don't want to debate whether we include the dam or not in the cost of the hydro, although I will say those pieces are not all that different, right? But how could they give us a valid number of what any kind of return or reasonableness would be if they're off by $5 million in the cost?
I don't think.
Shouldn't they have put a caveat in there and said,
I think they did put a caveat, which is it.
$5 million?
Our scope was to review the Gomez and Sullivan's numbers.
And give us information on how net metering worked. And that's right here on page 1.
What they
That was the scope of their job. Now, collectively, to answer your question, what we have to do is, and it's in our numbers, the town's got to go out and say, okay, we want to take this to the next level. We want to try and create a project, in my mind, with a plus or minus 15 or 20% contingency, not 30, and go out and really scope out the details of the job of what has to be done. Once we have general direction of, okay, we're gonna take the numbers and say, no hydropower in there. We're just gonna surrender license, do this. We need to spend $250,000 to get an engineering company to come in here and do that to
Bill.
give us the true numbers we need.
And Bill, go back to your dam remediation sheet, the first one.
Yeah, it's in there.
And this is line 36. It's why we put it in bold. But the answer to your question, Sandy, is really there. So
okay, but I gotta be honest, I'm having a moment here. I don't have any idea why we spent $20,000 when if all we needed to do was take the difference in the number between net billing and something else, and we were gonna use, I'm a little frustrated. It seems to me that we spent $20,000 to be able to say to people in the public, we've spent money, so we've got the right answer. That makes me uncomfortable
So
because we're not, if we use this number, we're completely recalculating any return on investment or any payback or anything else those guys gave us. So I'm not disagreeing with what you guys are saying. I suspect you're probably right. What I'm saying is, why did we spend that money? We didn't need to.
When was the dam last inspected, Jack? How much detail was it? Would we have to hire an engineering firm to literally go look at every square inch of that to see what the actual deficiencies are versus speculation that we could actually be paying another millions more dollars because the deterioration is far worse than what it is now? I guess
So-
that's my question is.
So when Gomez and Sullivan came, last August, they did a dam inspection, condition inspection. And they did it at no spill, so the water wasn't spilling over the dam, so they could see, that it in dry conditions on the downstream side. And they could assess the condition, and that's what they did there, that's what they based
The
it on.
entire
So,
length of it, Jack, or just?
yeah, the whole length of it, yeah, everything, under no spill conditions. So that's, I don't think we have any reason to, question their assessment of the condition of the dam. And obviously Kleinschmidt didn't recreate that. They didn't go get, create no spill conditions and go do any field work. It was simply a review of the Gomez and Sullivan findings. Gomez and Sullivan completely ignored net energy metering. They didn't even address it. They weren't familiar with it. They're not a main firm. That was part of the problem is, it was a whole part of the revenue model that was just ignored. And so we never would have had that number of net annual revenue of $155,000 without Kleinschmidt doing that calculation. But they also walked back Gomez and Sullivan's, estimation of kilowatt hours that would be generated in order to get that. So I think we solved, I think we reaffirmed a big piece of the basis of what we've done is, what is the revenue potential? I think it's starting to gel. What is the revenue potential?
That's been done before the flooding. I'm not a hydro expert, but.
Yeah, it was done in August.
August 23rd, 2020.
Would have,
Three
changed
and
the
the flood.
dynamics of the dam, because those floods don't happen very often.
So it could have been affected negatively by the. flood.
Yeah, if anything, it would be negative.
I wanna make a point, Steve. Your comment that you don't trust the interfluent numbers because they had an agenda.
Right.
My mission was not to make my own stab at what was right or what was appropriate. My mission was merely to take all the numbers we got from 3 different sources and put them together in one sheet
Try and make sense of it.
and try and make sense. Whether it's right or not is we'll get to in a few minutes. So, like I said, well, no, let me back up a little bit. We're gonna go to the public in February, early February. And I think we need to give them 2 things, 3 things. Power, which we need to figure out tonight. 2, what's this thing gonna cost? And 3, what's the likelihood of getting external sources? 3. So, as far as the what's it cost business is concerned, again, I come back, I say, let's do a range. And pick a range. We say on the low end, it could be this. On the upper end, it could be this. But we don't know at this point. If you want to really know, that's what line 36 is about.
And until we do that, then these concerns about the interfluent numbers or the, basically, we don't know until there's an engineer working for us, doing the numbers for us, accountable to us, and that.
And we talked about that with Kleinschmidt. We said, do we want to spend $20,000 to take the scope of what they have on page 1 and get that? Or do we want to spend $250,000 or more, maybe less, maybe more, to now consolidate and come up with an actual project plan with a detailed scope and with also the project laid out in terms of all the pieces for it, when they would be spent?
I guess this would just be personal. I think we've wasted 6 months on a hydro that is not economic, ever has been, ever will be, unless you get it subsidized. I mean, I hate to say that, I love hydro. But
Right.
when you look at the numbers, it's never been right, so to get hydro, that's a nice to have for this town.
The thing is that that's your opinion.
That's exactly right.
It's actually most of our,
Well,
the
maybe-
problem is that we are not the entire town. There is a big chunk of the town that thinks that hydro would pay for the dam and we'd all be making a profit. They're wrong. But if we didn't do, basically what the message we got from the first attempt at this was that group didn't trust that the homework had been done on the hydro. So if we just came back to the town again and said, well, we just dismissed it and we didn't do any extra homework, we would be in the same boat, which is a large chunk of the town thinking that we're being shoddy and dishonest and everything else.
Yep.
So we started off the process with the assumption that we were going to arrive right where we arrived. But for the due diligence on the people of the town,
Yeah.
we had to go through this
I
process.
agree. I trust it. Third party validation is covered. You gotta get it. I mean, but I sat in this place. And way back when, Gomez and Sullivan, 4.6, 4.8 million, the price went up to 5 or 7, 8 within a flu stop, and at the end of it, it was $10 million, you guys. And I sat here and I said, what's the difference between the 4.5, 5 million and 10? And it was gonna be the fish passage. And I said, what are we doing for fish passage? Well, we've got 23 options and all this and that stuff. I don't know. Now, when we look at the numbers, you're not talking $5 million on a fishway. You're talking 2. And you're
2.5 to 3.
At the moment, we're talking
But
800.
you're back up around $12 million. I mean, well, you're at 8.8.
Yeah,
I'm just questioning that maybe Kleinschmidt didn't get the right direction.
I think-
Take their numbers at 3.1 and made that be 6.6. It looks like they're $3 million off, and that's hard to believe.
I think they did get the right direction, but I don't mean to argue. Let's get a sense of scale. Okay? we put a little calculator up. You've got at the moment, a $12 million project to do everything. We're gonna do everything. So we're gonna make this 100% of this project. Is it gonna generate power? Yes. Jack, we're gonna borrow $12 million. What kind of terms can we get? In terms of term and
It's hard to predict, you know, if you're borrowing it, if you're actually borrowing the money 2 years from now, how much your interest rate's gonna come down? Hopefully some, you know, but you could plug in, you know, 6%, 5.5%, you could run 2, 3 models, 6, 5.5, and 5.
On what, range, 15-year, 30-year?
You plug that in too, you know,
Yeah,
so something like
Let's
this
just-
you would want.
Let's spitball right now and say, recognizing everything's gonna change. Would you say 15 years at 6%? Would you say 30 years at 6%? Just for this.
Any project that we would do in the, you know, millions of dollars, probably one that we want to spread out over the longest amount of time so that we could absorb the annual payments.
30 years.
Yeah, 30 years.
And then what would a rate today, recognize it changes in a minute. What would the rate today be? 6%, 6.5 cents? Would it be like a 30-year mortgage? Which is right now about
If you just
7%.
went to a bank and paid a market rate, you know, you're gonna be around 6, but I think, but obviously we try to find, is there any subsidized rate anywhere that we could do? I mean, could we go to USDA could we go to USDA, let's say, for a below market rate? Could we go to the main bond bank for a below market rate? So you'd look for that. So, and I don't have a sense of what, you know, what those would be, if they would even be available for a project like this. But you just run a scenario, say if there's no subsidy in the rate, run it at, and you say this is gonna be into the future and we think rates are coming down, run the model at 5.5, run it at 5.
Fed just announced today that they're not expecting for the next few quarters to make much of any cuts.
And the Fed's only hitting short-term rates. If you look at mortgage rates, after September, after the initial rate cut, mortgage rates went back up to 6.5 to 7%, depending on what your credit.
So let's go conservative, 6%, 30 years.
6% for 30 years.
Yeah.
Now, if we're doing the dam, or you're doing power, so you're talking about $712,000 a year.
Cash paid out over 30 years,
That's
every
right.
year.
Every year.
And
Now, the first 5 years would be slower because you wouldn't
I
have,
didn't hear the number. I didn't hear what you said.
can you see it on the
No.
screen?
go control plus, just make it a little bigger.
Well, I do this.
Okay.
Well, sort of.
Excuse me.
And then scroll over.
Screwed it up here. Okay, well, not that big. Hold on, guys. There.
So the first 3 or 4 years, because you wouldn't be borrowing the entire sum, 10 million, 12 million, 3 million, you'd be building into it till the point you get out 4 years. That's why you
Three,
have to
4
get a
years.
detailed project plan.
Yeah.
You'd then be after 4 years or 5 years, by the time we have the next FERC inspection, they'd have a definite plan. They'd see we're really doing work and none of us are gonna go to jail because we're not doing what we should be doing in the process. What you'd have then is at that point, you'd be at the full rate, which is $760,000 a year.
712,000.
712.
There's a number, okay? Now, you wanna do power.
I think it's pretty clear. And this was the purpose of the Klein Schmidt,
Get right to Sandy's question.
was to make sure that we don't want to consider it. And I mean, especially, I mean, it even gets a little worse when we say we don't know that we have the customers lined up that would be buying this power even if we did produce it.
All right, let's
With-
model
That
that.
actually is, in my mind, a bigger. I'd have had a hard time saying no, that we shouldn't try to find a subsidy, try to find something.
As somebody who
But
was,
this fact that we don't even know where the power would go.
Right.
somebody who was pushing the transparency big time to you guys, you know, I'm comfortable looking at this and saying that, you know, we did our due diligence, that's a lot of money.
It
And
is.
we'll be laughed out of the room if we go to a bond with that $12 million.
Now,
Yeah,
let's,
and also we don't know who's gonna buy the power.
there's a little uncertainty there. All right, so let's do this. we're only gonna do 75% of that project, there's 9 million, just the dam. We're not gonna do, power. So we're down to 650,000 a year. Now, let's get into Steve's point. Okay, that, Interfluve had some agenda and they puffed up their numbers. So let's knock off, just to think about it a bit, let's knock off another 5%. So
I'm
only
gonna say something,
10%.
first of all, you guys have all the numbers. I mean, don't take my personal opinion.
Well, all the numbers are available online. If you go to the old dam committee, dam
I
study,
know.
it's all there. That's where we got it from.
Steve, I think the point you're making is it's really on us. But,
Yeah.
okay, so we brought this down to, well, let's take it down a little more. 8 million. So we knocked $800,000 off of the dam fixing. And we're at $581,000 a year. Those are the numbers.
And that's what I would consider to be best case, because if the interflow numbers are not wrong, then that would be 10% back in.
And if you want to add a couple million or another 1.5 million for the fishway,
Yeah, and then the fishway, as a reminder, to everybody, we are not in control of the design. We propose a design.
Yes.
And we are told whether or not that design is going to be approved or not. And what we have heard is in some cases, the dam owners went and said, you know, here's our $3 million fishway that we want to design. And FERC comes back and says, nope, it's gotta be the $10 million one. And FERC gets to make the call with all their stakeholders. It's not just them,
All the interveners.
all the interveners. So they come back. So that's a design issue more than it is a structural issue. You can have Kleinschmidt go in there, or anybody, Gomez and Sullivan, and go in and figure out what, fairly reasonably, what the engineering costs are to stabilize the dam, to make the repairs as FERC says they need to be made. That's pretty straightforward. The fishway is a complete unknown and variable expense. And the problem for us is, once we've committed to doing it, if they come back and say, no, it's gotta be $5 million, we don't have the option to,
we're stuck.
we're stuck. So
We
if
gotta come
we've
back
just,
with money.
we've gotta go and start, you know, taking the fireman's boot out the road and start collecting more money, because we can't at that point say, oh, well, now let's just tear the dam down. Because we've gotten so far into the process. We've already spent, you know, a better part of $1 million on engineering at this point, probably. And
Those interim numbers. Check.
Yep.
What's the mill rate for $600,000?
It's about $1.5 million.
Yeah.
It's $1.5 million.
$1.5 million.
Yeah.
So if I have a $100,000 house, which nobody does,
a garage, $100,000
that's
garage.
$150.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, every year for 30 years.
200,000, 250, it's just that much.
Well, then, actually, that's not correct, Jack, because we have to figure in O&M on top of that, because the dam,
Yes.
the dam will require repairs of some sort
It's just,
before the
the-
third
right,
year.
oh, it's just the effect of the debt payment on the
Yes.
mill rate, not the total cost of
Exactly.
owning it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Just
And of course-
making that
And
point.
of course, there's no inflation in here and no landscaping.
Yeah.
Okay. So I believe that for the February meeting, we should, pardon me for picking on you, Steve, follow up on Steve's point that let's find the lowest possible numbers that we can agree that might be possible so that we have a bottom range, okay? Use these or maybe even add the big fishway to it, I don't know, but for the top range. Then we can do the calculations and show them what this means on the yearly payments and the tax rate. Okay, I think we should be prepared to do that in February. Now, given that, if you're all in agreement with that general approach,
Oh, yeah.
it's now time to answer your question, or for us to answer your question about do we do power?
Well, and even go back, I mean, if we were to go to the town in February, first of all, I will say, I agree, we need a low end and a high end. But honest to God, they better not change after that. I mean, to me, one of the biggest problems I had with the first round of this is that every time I looked at numbers, they were different. I think we have to be really, I would go with $10 million as a high end instead of 8.8 before I would go with 8.8 and then a year later have to say, oh, well, really. It was-
Chris,
Well, it could be, that will happen only because we haven't spent the money up front to do a
Well,
detailed
Then
engineering.
we have to
project.
be really careful about how
So-
we present that, because I do not want to have to explain to myself or anybody else why we said it was between 7 and 8.8. And then all of a sudden, there's articles in the paper and things on warrants and everything else that say, oh, no, now it's 10. Oh, well, all in, it's 20. Before I was done, I didn't know which number to believe. I want to be sure that we have an explanation every time we change a number, and we're open about that.
I completely agree.
All right? I mean, I can,
You gotta give us one caveat though.
what's that?
We're at the early feasibility stage. Is this project even worth doing?
I understand that.
Okay, that said, it's important, I think, no matter what we say in February, we also say, you gotta look at 936. We don't really have really good numbers until we spent that kind of money.
Yes.
So we're asking you tonight for your permission to spend that kind of money. So given that, you got a range to work with, all right? That's it, I cut you off.
No, it's
Fair
okay,
enough.
but we don't have, even with these numbers now, we don't have a funding source set, so.
There's no
Could we
budget.
go to the taxpayers and figure out, okay, if we have to fund this 100%, here's how your taxes are going up? Because right now, that's what this is saying. We don't have a funding source.
Yes, that's correct.
So if I said, okay, your tax is gonna go up by $200 a year, you know what's gonna happen.
Well, John, let's finish our.
Yeah, I mean, we gotta do the
finish
research.
February
We
meeting.
don't have the funding source now, so this is
Finish.
basically saying,
Yeah,
we need
so-
to have a number that says, there's 100%, you guys are paying for it, what is gonna raise taxes on everybody? in town?
Yeah, this, we
That's what
have to
people
go
wanna
on
see.
we have to go on the assumption. Because there is no clear funding source available for any of this. If we're gonna go forward with this project, the townspeople have to be prepared to put the entire bill. And if we find any offset funding, then it's a bonus. That is the way we have to look at it, because there is nothing that's short of coming in for an offset. And so that's where we have to be we have to get that point out there that hopefully things like land salmon will pay for the fishway, and that would knock down the full cost. But we have nothing in writing from that.
So I don't wanna scare the taxpayers, but at the same time, I want them to know that this is the scary number.
It's
Because we have
it's
no
scary.
guarantee
Yeah.
in February.
Yeah.
This is what you pay.
And
You wanna do
this
that?
gets back to also how the reason for spending the time and the extra money on determining hydro or no hydro. Because again, there's a portion of the people out there, we would say, well, it's gonna cost whatever the number is, 8 million, 10 million. And they would say, oh, but it will pay for itself if we had hydro.
Well,
And-
we've done the work.
Yeah.
Back to your piece for February. We also need to say, okay, this is what we think is a reasonable range of costs for us to make a decision or not. Now, how much of this do we think we can get externally? This, of course, Sandy's in your bailiwick. This is where I think we need to say, we've done X and Y and Z that we have done, like for my mind, for instance, we should talk to all the politicians, people
Yes.
at the state and federal level, done all that. And we can come back with a little bit more of, say, what we could say. Now, given that, I think we're back to nut cutting time on the power. Is there anybody who thinks that there's any reason to proceed with thinking about doing power?
The only reason is because if we could find a scenario like who would take the power, what I do think is that the chances of finding someone to be willing to grant money is more likely if it involves some kind of green energy than if it does not. That would be the reason, not because of the power itself, but because of its attractiveness to people that might be willing to spend money.
Anybody else?
I think now you have, next year you have, as you guys have talked about, this payroll tax, this added tax, and businesses aren't going to invest, aren't going to expand, so you're losing revenue that comes into the town, so we're asking taxpayers to take on a huge burden when their taxes are already going up. It's just insanity. I just don't. Power does, I'm agree with him, power is just, it's not even reasonable to put power in Dover. I mean,
Yeah, so
doesn't make no damn sense.
the whole issue about, well, putting that aside, our job is to present the information and not to prejudge whether people are going to accept it or not. I mean, I think a reasonable assumption is that this will not go over well with people. Granted, but that isn't our job. It's not our job to prejudge what people want or do not want. Back to Sandy's point about the green energy angle. If hydro was viable from a financial standpoint, then there would be a benefit to having it regardless of any other funding source. But if hydropower isn't viable, then the amount of money that we would spend on making a non-viable project so that maybe, possibly, we might get some offset money, it doesn't make any sense. It's not like, oh, for an extra $50, we could have hydro and we might get $3 million off the restoration of the dam. That's not the case. We would have to, going on the assumption that we would have to do basically a loss leader, we would have to come up with the $3 or $5 million.
Well,
Yeah.
understand the different scale. If you don't do power, you're spending $600,000 a year. If you do power, you're spending $700,000, even after the $155,000. So it costs you $100,000 a year to add power net to what we're doing. Isn't worth doing.
The chances of us finding somebody that would say, oh, we'll give you $6 million only because you have the green energy. So that's $3 million covers the offset for the dam, for the hydro, and $3 million offsets the dam itself. I think the chances of that are, I wouldn't say zero, because never should say that, but it is so close to zero that shouldn't factor into our decision making.
Right. I think we need to come back in February and having made a decision as to whether we think we should do power or not. And I think the decision should be pretty firm on our part. Yeah. A negative, 2 seconds.
No, fine.
A story from Dam One. There came a time when all 7 members voted. Nobody else was in the room. Nobody from the town except the select board people. No consultants were in the room. And there were 7 unanimous votes to go ahead and do this. And everybody looked each other in the eye and said, are you sure? Yep, sure. We can go to the public and talk about this. When it came time to go to the public, one of the people on that committee wasn't so sure anymore. And that had a horrible effect for a whole bunch of reasons. So what I'm suggesting here is we don't want to just go along to go along. Everybody in your own mind should be in your own mind so sure that you're willing to defend whatever decision the group makes. Am I making sense?
Oh, yeah.
I really would hate to avoid that. Steve, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, you didn't. I'll take 2 things and then be quiet. When you look at the numbers, like I said, and recalculate hydro against hydro, you're talking a 15.5 year payback, simple payback. Is that bad? Is that acceptable to a town? I don't know what your payback criteria is, what your cost benefit analysis is. What does the town capitalization policy say? We'll make this investment as long as we can pay it back in what? X. The town should have a policy of what's that cost benefit ratio, or they will invest in and when. I don't think this would fly, I'm guessing, and that is your answer. The other part is, as a taxpayer, I think I look at this committee saying, if you tell me it's $10 million, that's fine. Then I'm gonna say, why is it high paying? What did you do to try to find the money to offset? So it means the taxpayer didn't pay it.
That's correct.
You need that laundry list. I talked to the governor, I talked to this, I talked to this, I mean, the more you get, the better it's gonna defend you. And people will say, okay, you've kicked over every rock. It's $10 million. Here we go. I agree.
And part of that, and this is an issue that the public at large doesn't necessarily understand, which is, and I've heard it not just on this issue, but other issues where they're like, oh, well, I went on a government website and I saw that they've got funding for this sort of thing. They don't understand the complexity. They don't understand that generally there's a limited pool of money. So there's a process. It could take years. That what the general public doesn't understand when they see or hear about these things is that, sure, maybe we might get some money from that, but we won't know. We can't know before we go into this process. And so therefore it gets back to my prior point, which is that we have to be prepared to pay the full cost, and we can shake every single tree and look under every single rock to bring that down. And we are obviously motivated to do that. But to tell people that we've got things lined up to offset the costs, we have to just be firm and say, that is impossible. We cannot do that.
That's correct. That's correct. That's Sean's transparency business.
Well, I think it's right. You're right, Steve. It's just, but they're saying that we've kicked this rock.
Yes, and
Rolled and stopped,
right.
and we can't get the money out of it. I
Yeah.
mean, it is what it is, but we kicked it.
Yeah, we can do that list, we can rattle off all the things we've done. But even if we did find something, and we found some things that maybe possibly, if we had hydro, and without hydro, those possibilities go away. But part of the thing was that even when we saw that there was potential money to offset the cost of the dam due to hydro, it was still a crapshoot as to whether we could get some or any of it.
Not to mention that you're depending on flow of the river that nobody's guaranteeing.
Yeah.
Bill?
Looking at projects in the past, I did a lot of project work for a large paper company. Doing that work, what you're talking about, Steve, is accretive addition of the hydro on top of the investment into the dam itself. So on an accretive basis, we're adding in the hydro and we're going to spend X number of dollars for that. And that number, I think, is actually probably about $200,000 a year for the value of what that $3+ million, 3 plus or minus million is. And we're only getting 150,000 in revenue. On an accretive basis, that's a pretty poor investment in just me. This is me speaking as an individual and member of the committee. But in truth, you really have to look at it as a total, because there's no way you can accretively do the hydro without having the dam. And if you look at the dam itself, there are only 3 purposes for a dam. 1 is generating hydro. 2 is either flood control or water, having water, like a reservoir for it. Or 3 is recreation. Well, we have no revenue for recreation. So if you look at the dam as a whole, even the 4 million, 6 million, 8 million, 10 million, it's a horrible investment. A horrible investment, in my opinion, my personal opinion. So, and that's where we're going towards. And that's really what you went into, and saying, we're gonna go to the taxpayers and say, just fix the dam. This is big bucks. So when we're looking at it, and that's how I look at it, and I understand looking at it accretively, because Sandy and I know from work that we did in the past, that's the way people did it. You can't, because it just makes the project look good, but the overall project is a disaster.
Well, the issue is, we don't have a hydro. We have nothing. You have a hydro license. That's all we have.
And we have a cost associated with that hydro license that we've got to do something. Jack can come in and spend hours. We got to do something. But guess what? We got to do it now.
we put it off.
Clock is ticking, there's no
Here's
question.
another way of thinking. Would you buy Brown's Mills for $3 million? The town buy that for $3 million?
On
They
the
go
market
for $3 million to buy that operating asset,
for the dam.
the dam, the hydro. I mean, I'm just saying, if Brown's Mills came up and said, it's up for sale, would the town buy it? Would you want to go into the hydro business, really?
Yeah, yeah.
The answer is, it's not our ball of wax.
Right, and that's the other thing is Bill saying, so this gets into the kind of the municipal side of things. Looking at all the things that the townspeople expect and want from our town. $4 million, we could get a lot of other boxes checked off.
With money that could come into the town, in addition to it.
Is this
Exactly.
like bigger than the whole town budget? Like, they're asking that.
It is the town
one
budget.
project,
town
that's the-
budget.
double the entire town budget.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. All right, okay, let's bring this back.
Okay.
So. Going back, thinking about our February meeting. Okay. Bill, I think you alluded to it earlier. Our job is just to give people enough information and to make an informed decision. Agreed?
Yes.
Okay,
What decision are they making in February?
coming to that. Okay, number one, okay. Should we do power? Okay. Number two, okay, should we proceed with spending either 8 or 12 or whatever number we come up with the next steps? Okay. Now, question for you guys. Could we be strong enough to say it is our unanimous, strong opinion that we do not do power? Get that off the table in that meeting.
Yeah, we should absolutely do that.
What do the rest of you guys feel?
But I find it hard to sit here. I'm not for the power. I've not been since attending Dam 1. But to sit here and say, to give you the decision, no, we're not going for power with this, and I know we're not talking about it, but this little white knight sitting on the side who might want to bring us some power for free, then, oh, okay, it's all right again. So
Well, that.
in one sense, I'm saying his power is crazy, let alone whether it's green or not.
Okay, so we make a very strong recommendation that we do not do power. Agree?
For us to not do power.
Okay.
If a white knight comes riding in and says, I'll buy the whole dam and do everything, fine. Different scenario.
All right. Got that out of the way. Okay, next step,
Not yet.
next step.
All right, wait, let's walk through. I agree
Review
with
that
that.
again.
I agree with the statement. You agree with the statement? Do you say? Okay, I'm, everybody else?
I agree with this.
Alcina?
I'll see.
Do I get a vote on it? I mean, I agree,
Of course you do. The rest of us don't matter, so go ahead and make a motion.
well, I'm sitting in your seat. I agree with
You're
the
the grant
statement.
writer.
Okay,
you
so-
know.
Yeah.
So we
exactly.
will take a formal vote on that. But why don't we just hold off and you
All
keep
right,
going?
let's
through.
proceed to the next step. Okay. Now, we're talking about the potential for, I'll pick a number, $7 to $9 million to repair the dam. Okay? And right now we have I'll just say this, a low likelihood of getting external funding for this. Okay? Should we proceed? You now have, assuming we hand out those two little sheets, so everybody can see it.
I
With
think it's,
some range
or
of them.
something like this.
Something like
Needs
that,
to
yeah.
be boiled down. like-
And,
Did the voters say, we make the decision on that, or we bring in the number to the board, so that voters can say,
Oh, yeah,
they
well,
they voted
This
not
is-
for us to make a decision on whether we fix the
Yeah.
dam, they
It's
want a
just
number.
recommendations for us. We've got no authority.
yeah, and there are discussion points in February, because I want to see where they come out,
We're making a decision on this, the hydro, like, yes or
It's
no.
just our recommendation.
And the February, I'm sorry, but just to be clear, the February meeting is for public input. It's not
Agreed.
for any kind of a vote.
Agreed,
Right.
I mean, it's a take a temperature thing.
exactly.
And yes, it is somewhere between 7 and 9, or maybe even $7 and $10 million that,
To do the dam.
Or 10,
But-
14.
but
We're just moving numbers.
I think and maybe this is where you're going. The thing that's important in February is to be able to say, this is the cost for this approach.
Mhm.
No hydro. But what what we really need to do first is spend whatever it is, line 36, is that the one? Yeah. We do need to move ahead with spending $250,000-300,000 to determine where in that 7 to 10 this really falls. But I do have one other piece. Emery said this, like in our first meeting. If we go to the town in February with this, and I don't know if we can even get a temperature on this between now and February, what appetite does the Nature Conservancy and the salmon people have if we were to come back and say, no hydro, take the dam out, but rebuild with a fishway?
Well, I wouldn't need a fishway if you take the dam out.
It's the
No,
nature
no,
line, the
Because
nature line.
that's off the table, because the town people said they want
Oh,
the
I
impound.
thought you would just,
I said dam.
yeah.
But they want the impound, it was clear in that, and I've got the paperwork here saying, if you want the impoundment, you may have to come back and spend. At that time, it was $6-7
I know,
million.
I understand
So now
that.
we're coming to them and saying, you're gonna have to spend 7 million. Do you want the impoundment? And they've got to come back in a vote collectively and say, yes, we want it, or no, we don't. I believe I know how that vote's gonna come out.
Oh, I absolutely know how it's gonna be.
So motions are swept
No.
aside when it comes to money.
All right, now, I like the notion of taking temperature. Okay. If people listen and say, you guys are full of crap, okay, we have more work to do, right? But on the other hand, if the house is absolutely where Sean was a second ago, there's no way we should proceed. You're asking us to spend $300,000 before we get the next step? No way. Then I think we have enough data that we go back to the select board and we put the question to them. Right? And to my mind, I'm running a select board. I'll forgive me, Steve, for that.
That's okay, take it, take
The whole
thing.
thing. Think about, I'm on the select board. You call a special town meeting, all right? And you get 2 questions. And you can't answer both of them or none of them. You have to answer one or the other, okay? Do we want to proceed with this potential $10 million project? Or do you want to reconsider taking the dam out? And everybody at that vote, at that meeting, gets to vote for one or the other.
Yes.
And you count the votes.
Because in June of last year, the vote was take the dam out and have somebody else do it. That was the vote.
Correct, correct.
And so now there's a different vote that's being put forward. You have this choice or this
But
choice.
then there's a third one,
Yeah, which is,
the old N6N7, the Nature Light Fishway. Is that not more palatable to the Nature Conservancy than a fishway?
no. Because it's a lot more expensive.
And they said when in the dam one, and we could have members of the dam one committee, because I asked that, I was very much in favor of the N6, N7. I thought it would be gorgeous.
Mhm.
And they basically said, no, we would not fund it.
And
At
the
that
other-
point in
Are
time.
you sure they said
Yeah,
that? I thought they
I am
said
positive. There's one more
funding
thing.
would be tougher
Yes.
and we may not come up with.
They would come up with the money to remove the dam
Well,
specifically, which is 3, 4, 5, whatever, just to remove the dam, deal with some of the licensing stuff. But they would not pay to put in the fishway, and the fishway was the huge cost.
They were
was
very
it
clear
more
about
than
that.
6 million?
Oh, yeah, it was
It
like,
was.
We had that discussion,
it
remember
was
when I
like
did that back in
13 million.
October?
It was almost double. Next thing is, they said, look, and at the end of this process, you're still gonna have a dam.
Yeah.
And it's still gonna need operations, it's still gonna need licensing, and you're probably gonna spend more on the upkeep because of the way these things get built. So they were very clear. We will help you, but we are very confident that we will not be able to fund the entire thing.
I'm going to be honest. I think they were very clear because they thought they were going to get you to vote the way you did and that the townspeople would approve it. I am not ready to say that I am convinced that they're drawing as hard a line in the sand as we think they are about whether or not they would be interested if we went back and said, we are willing to remove the dam. We are willing to get rid of hydro. We, as the townspeople, may be willing to come up with some amount of money. Maybe we come up with $3 or $4 million. Maybe we have to. But they would then maybe provide the engineering and remove the dam, and all we have to do, sounds easy, but buy the rocks and find the bulldozer.
What we can do, Sandy, between now and our January preparation meeting Since we can have that conversation with them.
Absolutely.
It's fair.
Can I just throw this little thing about with the nature like Fishway as well, you have to keep in mind too, we are re-engineering the river, right? So there's gonna be bulldozers and rock placements and whatnot to try to keep that impoundment. What you also have to take into consideration, that is still technically quote unquote a dam. So you have federal regulations for fish passage, we fall under that category again. So if the feds come in and say, okay, we don't feel that there's enough Atlantic salmon that are passing up this fishway, they're gonna force the town to do another feasibility study of the Nature Lake Fishway if we go that path. And then that's at our cost, because Howland is running into this situation. And at that point, if they come back and say, okay, yeah, the efficacy of this Nature Lake Fishway is not sufficient enough, you're gonna have to go ahead and do, once again now, this is at our cost that we're gonna have to re-engineer the Nature Lake Fishway again. How many more $1 million is that gonna be at that point?
Well,
And that's
So we're
the,
better off pouring concrete.
that said,
what's that?
We're better off pouring concrete.
It's a more sure, if we're gonna, if the goal is to keep the impoundment. So this gets to Sandy's thing. If the goal is to keep the impoundment, then the most straightforward, easiest to cost out, easiest through the regulations is, as Sean says, pour concrete. Just fix the dam, get it done. It seems that removing the dam and putting in a natural impoundment is going to be vastly more expensive, way less sure.
$13 million.
Yeah. And there's, from the Atlantic Salmon Federation's standpoint, they've got all kinds of projects they want to do. This isn't the only thing that they're interested in. And their goal is to have the fish pass through. And they've got one option where they could go in for $5 million and just remove it. Or they've got another option because of the stakeholders are being pains in the butt. And now it's a $14 million project. If I were them, I would say, to hell with you. I've got other projects to do. So I would not be so sure that, that we've got some sort of leverage or offer that we could make them to say, oh, sure, we're into this for 14 million.
But isn't this, we know we're gonna do at least some work to get started on the availability or lack thereof of external funding. Who knows? But we'll do some work. This is a simple phone call.
Yeah.
And I would volunteer to do that before our next meeting. They have that, are you at all interested in working with us on a Nature Lake Fishway? And, they might say what you said, Steve, I think they would.
Yeah.
But we have more data.
Now I'm gonna do something, Sandy, that you don't like. I'm gonna say there are other costs here. And the other costs that are here in doing the work that I've been doing in looking at this, looking at regulations, looking at the FERC sites, looking at all the others. We've got fish studies ahead of us. Any way we do this, unless we remove the dam, there have to be fish studies, there have to be water studies done. Even just to surrender the license. So it's 200, let's pick a number. This is a placeholder, 250,000. We need an RFP as a placeholder for the detailed engineering work of what we want to do.
They're on the sheet.
Yeah, on the sheet. We also have on the sheet here that Chris hasn't talked about as much. We have at least 150,000, 100,000+ for fish studies. We have another probably 50 to 100,000 or more for water studies, just to do the water study to meet the requirements to surrender the FERC license. On top of that, you're going to have to do testing. One of the issues that came up with Natel and their project, they were going to finance for Mayo Mill to put in their low volume, low head hydroelectric system, was they were going to be monitoring fish, tagged fish, for 3 years, 3 to 5 years, to prove that, and I'm going to show a little later, if we ever get to it, this Foxcroft one, what they were going to put in. And I know we're running out of time and I'm talking too much.
Yeah.
But that's the point. They were going to spend they were going to spend significant amounts of money just to do the continuing testing. And we're going to have to spend significant amounts of money over the course of 3 and 5 years to check the fish, make sure they are coming up. There have been fish studies done. There was a University of Maine PhD guy who did fish studies who showed our dams got problems. Well, et cetera. So there's money and supervision required and working through the FERC license. This is just a nightmare.
Okay, so because we are running behind. Chris, do you want to just summarize about for the February?
That's correct. What I'm thinking is, what have we done mechanically? We've met N times. These are the members of the group. Get that out of the way. Secondly, what have we accomplished in this time? Okay, there's three things. Number one, we have looked at costs. We have made our own decision, subject to your approval, town, on power generation, agreed? And we've taken a first cut at looking at external funding resources. Okay, that's a lot in the time that we spent. Next, we're gonna get into, okay, here's at least the cost piece. This basically, however we dress it up. And here's the cost piece. Here are some options with power, without power. At the end of this, we strongly suggest we go without power. And you've got the data on this, and you're gonna do a little piece on what we've done on external sources, right? And we're essentially throwing this open to discussion, taking the temperature, as it were. That's how I see the meeting going in February.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a decent chance that there is a storm of saying, no way should we do this, we should stop it. In which case, our charge is to take this back to the select board for their discussion of another meeting, town meeting. I think that's where we end up.
Yeah,
Can I just make one suggestion?
Yeah.
In this meeting, Chris, as a taxpayer, the old Whipham, what's in it for me? People don't understand $8 to $10 million. You can give them 7 to 9, that means nothing. Jack was right when you said the mill rate's gonna go up X.
oh, yeah.
There it is.
That.
Yeah,
That's
we'll-
what you need to tell people. So right there, you say, I'm valued at $300,000 and I'm gonna go up.
But the town thought that they were being lied to last 8 months ago when they did that.
Yeah.
What's
But-
it make it different now?
Well, now supposedly we've taken another look at it. We've gone over, we've got a different mix of people. It is entirely possible that in this February meeting, that they'll tell us that they don't trust us and they think that we're all doing something wrong, and that's entirely possible. And at that point, you just gotta be like, I don't know what we can do.
Well,
I mean,
there's one other big piece here. There's one other big piece. Well, two things. This is a much more representative.
oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
1A, we have a lot more data.
Yeah.
Than we did then, that we can stand on and present with a lot more behind it. And two, and I think this is the big one, we're not being perceived as being led through by the nose by an outside party
outsider
who's got
group.
invested interest, okay?
Yeah.
I think if you put those three together, I suggest that we're gonna get a pretty fair hearing, especially if some of what were no votes on the last time around were very much involved in the presentation, because they'll believe you guys. They won't believe me, but they'll believe you guys. I think we got a good chance of having a rare and reasonable discussion. How it ends up, I don't know, and I don't care, really. It's up to the town.
So,
So that's how I see it going. But we have to take notes. Are we all agreed that we strongly recommend that we do not depower?
I think we should just do a formal vote on that if you want to make the motion.
I make a motion that we are prepared to strongly recommend that our project not include power.
I second.
Okay, any more discussion before we vote?
Just one quick thing.
Sure.
I was a proponent of the power. But the numbers don't jive.
Yeah.
And I've talked a lot with Steve too, and the numbers just aren't there.
Yeah.
So,
We could even say reluctantly.
well,
I agree with
Yeah.
Tracy.
Yeah.
We certainly came in an office.
Taxpayer.
Yep.
All right, secondly, okay.
Oh, that was the discussion.
Any other
We
discussion?
haven't done the second vote. All right, any more discussion? Thank you, Tracy. No, it's absolutely a great point. All in favor of the motion?
it's not there.
Yeah.
All right.
Next point,
And that's gonna carry a lot.
Well,
the second point. that we will, for our next meeting, January, we will end up that meeting with a range of expected cost numbers. Okay, that we can believe in and we can take to the group.
Yeah, and we will formally vote on those numbers. And I'm just gonna say this, because I know what Chris was saying before about the rocking the boat after vote. We're all going to vote on it. If you have any second thoughts about the numbers, that has to be before you vote. Because after a vote, I don't want to hear anybody saying, well, but I wasn't really sure when I voted. We are making a recommendation to the town. It's okay if you vote no, because then we could say, here's what the vote was, 8-1 or 7-2. It's no pressure. You should vote according to what you believe in.
Be prepared to stand by
And
it.
be prepared to stand by it. And if you're not 100% sure, then I'm asking you to vote no on the numbers. If we can't reconfigure them to satisfaction. It is far better for the public to hear a consistent message, even if it's not a unanimous message.
I just speak for myself here, and this is what he was talking about. I felt that the previous committee did not have inclusive people like me on it, where we thought it was just people that board members knew. And I'm speaking from me and some other perspectives. You know, we felt like there wasn't a lot of communication, but now that I'm on here looking at these numbers, I feel much more versed, making, good decisions that, okay, this is a lot of money. Like, this doesn't make any sense. So, my perspective is now that I'm involved in it, I understand now. It's more comfortable for me, transparency wise.
Yeah.
And Sean, do you think you could get that across to the other, I call them no votes?
I'm not the whole town, no. I mean, some people like Steve had mentioned meetings ago, they're never gonna believe whatever you say.
Yeah.
And eventually, like I talked about in one of these meetings, we can't just keep going around. I don't want to remove the dam. I don't want $10 million. We can't even like Tom said, we can't have this thing going 5 years where people just vote
Well,
no
we
on
can't.
removing the dam, but no on the funding to fix it. I mean,
Yeah.
who is the stopgap? Is it the board that comes and say, you know what, we gotta put a stop to this?
That's where we're gonna
What
get
about
into how the vote is
Okay.
worded.
It has to stop.
And the final thing is, unless you guys, almost by acclamation, tell us differently, we will proceed on the next steps in drawing up a plan, which include us beginning to spend significant amounts of dollars on the interim costs. Are you all in agreement with us doing that?
Yeah.
And we have taken their temperature if we put these things through them. Okay?
Yeah.
I have no idea how it comes out. I don't really care. All I know is we're doing our job.
Yeah.
So you okay with this?
Yeah. The question that will have to go, well, there's a number of different ways we can do the question, then we'll jump right over to you. What we have to do is have a pass-fail type vote where there is no can kicking down the road. This is now, people either vote to basically revisit and get rid of the dam, or authorize the town, and not just for the $300 or $200,000 line 36 to do the engineering. All up front, this is my personal thing. That vote has got to be to approve the town, authorize the town to borrow up to whatever our top number is, including the 300, and because of course the line 36 is in there. Because as a taxpayer, I don't want to vote for $300,000 expense and then to not like the answer that comes back from that and then reject it. It's got to be all in. And even if the number comes in at 6 million or 7 million,
I remember
that's a
Tom,
huge number.
I remember you, Tom, the lady was asking at that meeting, hey, can we change it? And you said the vote is already there. But at that time, Tom, I knew, hey, we could be back to this whole point where we're voting on removing the dam again. So
Yep.
now that we're doing this process, get a little more clarity
Yep.
that if they make a decision next time, we go.
Yeah, it's got to be an all or nothing.
The commitment is that whole interim cost thingy.
Yeah.
That we're gonna be diving into that and the town being prepared to commit to spending, I don't know what that total is.
Whatever the number is.
It's on the sheet.
1.2.
1.2 million. That's really what we're talking about on our dime, before we can start digging dirt.
I mean, you're talking about spending a couple $100,000 on studies and people just were complaining about spending $300,000 on an ambulance.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
way more
So
important.
that's another thing.
This is sort of just we have to remember too, as part of that discussion goes on, if we say we're gonna remove the dam. Last June, there was a commitment that we could get that done.
We're gonna have to
We have to revisit it. We have to recognize there is a likelihood we could get it done, but we're still gonna have to chip bucks in.
yeah, we might very well, but in the meantime, Chris, hopefully you can suss out
Yeah.
based on our recommendations, going back to the Nature Conservancy, Atlantic Salmon Federation conglomerate and saying, what if the town reverses its vote? How much are you in or out?
Can you help us?
That's a quiet conversation.
Quiet
Give us
conversation.
some detail.
Or
I'd like to be
what
part
are
of it,
they,
and I'd like sanity.
what are they in, what is their appetite for just the Fishway piece?
Yeah.
That's the other, I
We
mean,
can,
there's
we
two
can still
questions.
ask about that.
That's correct.
And I know, like, the committee was, what, 7 or 9 people that you guys had in the last committee? How many was it? Six, because when I mentioned to you that any sort of committee, like if this is ever done again, it needs to be people like landowners, recreators, regular town people, everybody that has stake in this has to be involved either on a committee or part of that process. It cannot be just 6 people the board chooses. It has to be everybody. That's where people were upset. They didn't feel like that the landowners on the edge of the river or people who use the river or regular taxpayers had any voice in it. Yeah, that's just my take on it. Doesn't mean you guys did anything wrong, but that's how I heard.
Well, that's certainly how it was perceived. So, and then that, and perception is reality. And therefore that's why we made sure that we did this board differently.
All right, so at our next meeting, we need to prepare for February. Between now and February, what are we doing so that we end up with a full house, in February? Is it too soon to be thinking about?
Yeah,
that?
we talked about, we don't even have that on the agenda for tonight.
Are we not meeting in January?
Yeah.
We need to.
Yeah,
At least
in
one.
January, we've got to get the word out, but we don't have that on the agenda to try to figure out the ins and outs.
How much more time do we have tonight?
Well,
We're 2 hours in.
we're 2 hours in, and we
I
really want to get Bill's.
We have to deal with the issue of the Foxbrook Fishway, and I can do that. I can talk like the FedEx commercial from the 1980s. The bottom line is X, and I'll say, here's the bottom line, and I'll try and go through the pieces. The pieces are important.
Yeah, I believe that what we should do is move on for Bill. And then, I mean, because the topic of how to get all the information out, we can set a meeting in early January and get that kicked off. And the thing is, to know about public notification, you can't do it too soon because then they forget about it anyway. So, and I'm counting myself as one of those people. Oh, yeah, great. Okay, thank you.
A $500,000 is.
Yeah, she's got it.
Is that what it
So the
amounts
Zoom
to?
is gonna see it's not a policy.
Okay.
It is a,
$400,000
So
is
that's
one
why
year.
600,000 instead of.
there are, if anybody is interested, there are 3 extra copies of scrap.
Yeah.
Not to look.
I just like to give your whole committee a compliment as a citizen observer, 2 thumbs up for the process so far.
Thank you, Dick.
You're doing a very thorough job.
Your opinion matters.
You know, and like for me, difference, money wise, nobody ever told me about the mill.
God by the damn, really.
How is that possible? My house is not valued what somebody else. Nobody ever said, this is the impact on the mill rate. That's key to me.
I thought that's,
Yeah.
Jack, or Chris said that.
I
earlier.
never,
Nobody
I
said anything about
never
the mill rate.
heard that
Just
the
said-
last time around. I asked more than once. And what we heard was the taxes will go up $1,200. Well, that was only if you had a $400,000 house.
And we observed that.
And most people aren't bright enough to figure out how to back that in to a mill rate increase. Had somebody said it's gonna be
There's,
3.5 mils.
I don't think there was anything.
But it doesn't matter. I like that number though.
All right,
What's the number?
Okay,
Bill, the
Knowing that
floor is yours, sir.
now I'm gonna try and go through this quick. If you have any
I gotta do
questions,
that now.
please don't hesitate to stop. Please don't hesitate to call me or have the questions, write them up for the next meeting. So. Again, I didn't. I'm not capable. Next page. So what's the purpose of the discussion? Ah, good. Oh, you got next page. So purpose, I'm gonna quickly talk about regulatory compliance for Fishway. I'm also gonna show some pictures of Fishways that I've showed before. And then I'm gonna look at how this thing would happen based on the information that was provided by Cheryl and by Jake. And, Sandy had some influence in talking with them previously about that whole possibility. What properties are impacted, and then a preliminary cost estimate. Next.
Does everybody in here know what Bill's talking
Well,
about?
you'll see in a minute. 'Cause I'll-
Yeah, okay.
So basically, we wanted to find the scope of a possible fishway around the Piscataquis River that would circumvent the two dams that are there. It would then, the idea was presented to the dam committee by people from the public, and we wanted to make sure no stone unturned. Let's look at it and say, is this a possibility? What would require to do it? Let's get some detail next. I have some various things. If you read that, here's what we refer to. This is the FERC number for the dam. How it's referred to. I'm going to show elevations. They're going to be height above sea level. Kruger currently operates the hydroelectric dam at Browns Mill. That's the designation for it. They call that the lower dam project, Moosehead project. Also, the dams are referred to as Moosehead project. When I see FBF, that's Foxbrook Fishway. Next. And this PDF will be on the website if you want to look for it. So let's talk briefly about regulatory compliance, because this gets into what I was talking about earlier regarding even if you surrender the license and get rid of the hydro power generation and we keep the dam or keep an object there, we still have to comply. And I've got some motions I want to make later about this. What is it? If you have to have a plan, a licensee for an object like a dam has to have a plan to monitor fish passage. You have to then be able to conduct regular monitoring effectiveness of it. And you have to provide annual reports of that effectiveness. So that was part of what was in the Natel Energy proposal to amend the license that was submitted by, where's Jack? He always leaves, just go ahead. He had enough. Jack was the one that submitted it back in November of 2020. I got the date. To be able to amend the license to be able to generate hydro through Natel Energy. But it was the town that submitted it because the town is the owner of the dam. Natel was going to finance it for Mayo Mill LLC. This was part of what they put in. They were going to monitor, and I'll show you in a minute what they were going to put in. So go next. At the old dam. Fish passage is designed to accommodate various species, particularly when we're talking about endangered species, the biggest one of that grouping being the Atlantic salmon. They have to be able to pass with non-injurious movement. They have to be able to pass in a timely manner. That's one of the big problems that they have right now down in Howland with the Nature Life Fishway. It's not the Nature Life Fishway that's the problem. It's the way they designed the Nature Life Fishway with the existing dam. And they're not getting what they call attraction of the fish into the Nature Life Fishway to go up. They can go up the Nature Life Fishway. If we had one, Sandy, that would not be an issue as much because there's no extra dam there. There's just the Nature Life Fishway, and they would find their way up that because they would be attracted to it.
Hydro draws the fish.
And also hydro causes the attract, and yes, effective passage means both technical and biological criteria that they have to actually get there, and technical criteria they would. Next. Okay, dam owners also will have to continually upgrade the passages, and that gets back to maybe a 5 million, maybe a more solution, or you're not effective enough because of the testing that you've done, you have to do more work. You might have to install new fish ladders or different fish ladders. You might have to implement downstream passage systems, which is what was proposed by Natel, or modify the dam operation to enhance fish migration. An example of this that was included in Natel's grouping is during 2 months of the year rather, in the spring, and 2 months of the year in the fall when the fish actually pass. they would only operate the dam for certain hours in the evening at dark, because fish don't pass in the dark, they pass during the daylight hours. So that during the daylight hours, the dam wouldn't operate. In the spring is when you have the best load. In May, June, you have the best water available, and the same thing in the fall when the fish are making their migration in September, October. So they're essentially, the number that they had for effectiveness of a hydro generating facility was not dealt with by Kleinschmidt, because they hadn't done the full study to look at, they were just commenting on the numbers. There's actually less than a 50% capability of the dam to be able to produce from its capacity. So you've got some fish migration issues. You have to modify the operation. And that was in the NATEL project. Next.
Bill, just one quick point.
Yeah.
The period of monitoring that comes afterwards, if they find, they meaning the federal government, finds that this fish passage is not doing what they want it to do, then they say, we have to fix it. And that, if that's another $3 or $4 or $5 million,
That's ours.
that's ours.
Now, recognize, if you look and see what's going on at the Shauna Dam with Brookfield Energy, Brookfield Energy is doing a relicensing. Relicensing is very onerous to do, but we are doing we're basically doing a mini relicense because we have an exempt dam. We have to go back with that exempt dam, and we've got to surrender the license. And in order to do it, we have to meet all the criteria of 12 or 13 or 14 federal agencies and every one of the interveners, including Atlantic Salmon and a whole bunch of other, people, individual stakeholders that are willing to intervene and make commentary. This is what, go ahead.
Quick question. Right now, the only fish, they've got to get past Brown's Mill. So at 25 feet, 25 feet, that pond from dam to dam is where the fish is at. You don't have to go up the Scotticus River, because that is you're gonna get them from that up over the dam.
Yeah, but all of the reds are north of us. All red, REDD is where the fish actually go to spawn,
right.
to lay their eggs.
The baby fish.
The baby fish. So we've got fish that have got to go through our dam, and they do go through the dam now. But we don't know the effectiveness, and we're gonna have to find out.
They get down through Brown's Mill. They go through that fish ladder?
Yeah, they do. They have.
Really?
They do.
But the problem is, we don't know how many are going, and we have to prove how many are going to be able to keep an arrangement with the Danil Fishway. So this is what was proposed for Mayo Mill when they had NATEL Energy come in. They were gonna keep the Danil Fishway that was there, but the big problem they were coming up with is you don't have the fish passage to be able to go downstream. So they were gonna create, with the intakes that are located for the hydro and the screens available, a chute that would knock the fish could go down. And therefore you'd get the attraction. This is where the hydro water's coming out, but you get the attraction here or here at the times of the year when it's necessary. So that's what it was gonna look like. Keep this in mind of what this looks like right here. Hydro not coming in is really important because, go to the next page, we would look at the one that was suggested by Nature Conservancy and that group, a vertical slot fishway. And it would go across, go to the next line, next one. It would go across the entire mill, 350 plus feet, going from right over the southeast corner, all the way down. Guess what? It would end up right here where the powerhouse would be.
No, there's no power.
And there's no power. We can do it. Otherwise, if you look at it, we couldn't do it. And if you go to back to the previous page, more, you have 2 pages, one more. If we put power in there, it wasn't gonna work with a fish ladder because this was going to, yes. So next, keep going. So let's go. The important part, the Scotticus River. Here's how the fish passage is currently going. And this is looking just straight up. This blue line coming across here, it's about a mile. This green line is the one for the Fox Brook Fish Passage, FBF. Go to the next one. It shows it a little bit of an angle, showing how it would go. That's about a mile. That's about 1.2 miles. Go to the next one. So this is what it looks like. Next one. Goes through 2 Danil Fishways, go through Kruger. The water, multiple local government agencies do this. One of the most important pieces of this particular part is, and that's why I want a jack here, when the dam was taken back by the town from our friends at Moosehead, when Moosehead so it basically canceled their lease on it. It mentions that there are water rights associated with the dams, both dams, and there are water rights that Kruger, at that time it was Charlie Fitzgerald, but Kruger has for water passage through the upper dam and the lower dam.
All the water.
I don't know, I assume it's all. I'm not the lawyer, but we would have to check on that. So one of the big issues you have is if you wanted to take an offshoot, which we'll show in a second, that goes and pulls water away from the river, you've got to be able to find out or figure out where the water rights are and how those water rights exist, because you'd be taking water away from the other dam. Next page.
Right.
Not to mention lowering the water level.
You want, end up lowering the water level in the river too. So this is what this one looks like, the existing. If you go to the next page, this shows an elevation change going from about 339 feet. The actual top of the dam is about 340. But if you looked at the dam this year and where it has been, it's been below 340. In fact, there was a period from mid-August through mid-October where it was probably about 334 feet. It was about 4 feet below. Going in the interim section between the Main Street Bridge, West Main Street Bridge, 328 feet down to about 305 feet at the south end. Next. So that's what we currently have. A nationwide fishway. This is the one at Howland. This is what it looks like. Next. So basically, it would start at the boat ramp, go to the Grove Street culvert, and that's where the major work would be done. From that area, it would be roughly 12 feet wide is what I put in with riprap on the side to be able to have stability. It's 2,500 feet long in that section, and we'd have to go through terrain anywhere from 1 foot to 20 feet. It might be 18 feet. We'd have to get a surveyor to come in and do a detailed, find the optimum point, maybe 18, maybe 15, whatever, but it's still a lot of dirt have to move, particularly in the section that's down near McCusick in that area. Foxbrook Culvert at Grove Street is where it would meet. So this is really the primary part is from the area right by the Chamber of Commerce going up to Grove Street. The other section, I said, we won't do anything to it because that's the natural path of Foxbrook. And water currently goes down there. And this is to try and say, not to over engineer. So keep going next. So here are the parts we have. We call it Part A, going to Grove Street, and then Part B, and this is the part going from the ramp up. Next. A little bit of an isometric view of it, sort of showing the high area of the town here and going to low area. Foxbrook drainage comes from here down the hill and right about here down. This area is where you have hill that you have to be able to work with. Next. Okay, so this is really, keep going. This part, not much is going to be done to it. Go next. Section. Not much is going to be disturbed. Currently, there's water already flowing in from the Foxbrook drainage to it. Next, this is what the cross section looks like. Here is what the elevation looks like. Going from about 335 feet, a little bit of bounces to 340, and that's when I was getting the area here. There may be a part there where it's actually a slight waterfall. If you go to the next one, here's what we see. Going from 335 feet down to about 305 feet, with the bulk of it, this being kind of a flat section, moving up or down 3 or 4 feet, and then going down to the river. Next, and that area of Foxbrook doesn't continuously have water.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, am I correct?
Well, I mean, the thing is, I don't know what the depth of the water is, the clear water that the fish need and for how long they can go. But that would, obviously that would all factor in as to whether or not there's even going to be the volume of water.
And you have to take it from the main part of the river to make sure it was continuously flowing.
And where, if it blocked only for 15 feet.
SOL.
Yep.
Next. Okay, now let's take from the boat ramp. Here's what it looks like going through on Google Earth. Next, we'll see the profile. Okay, starting going through the Pine Street intersection. The Pine Street intersection's got a whole bunch of stuff going on. You got sewer lines, you got water lines. You'd have to basically tear that up, and I'll show that in a section in a minute. The path is 2,500 feet long. You've got traverses 20 different properties. I'll show the properties in a minute. And you have South Pine Street intersection. We have to have a major rebuild done to it. Yeah, it even cuts across one of the interested parties that are here today. Next. So you can see what happens here. At this level, you've got about 335, 338 feet. In this area over here, you're going up to somewhere in the neighborhood of about 345 plus or minus. You're coming then down to about this 330 feet at Grove Street, right at that point. So you got a whole bunch of work to take out a whole bunch of dirt in order to be able to create a canal in that area, create a pathway, and then fill it back up with some rock and make sure you have stabilization on the side. Next, properties impacted. Here's basically the route that would go across. On the next page, I got a list of the properties. Some properties would have to be outright purchased that would have just land. For example, in this area, now this is the town map, and it shows roads that are there that aren't there.
Different streets that are laid out over 100 years.
Yeah, exactly. So those streets aren't there, but these properties are. There's a whole bunch of land right here. There's land, there's the Chamber of Commerce there. You've got the oil company right here. You've got Fraz's place there. You've got this there. You got Tom Lazat's property right here. And the back part of the property would have to be basically taken away. You could keep the house, but in here you'd have to take the property because of the size of the property and where it would go, the entire property and building. So the listing of all the properties that would be involved next. Okay, other properties, there are 20 parcels of land, 5 parcels of land and buildings, 10 parcels of land, 4 where you would take some of the land. Next, here's the list of the property. Here's the list of the parcel number, property, and owner. And then I put in a number to be able to say, let's take the current assessment, and if it's land, we'll give you double. If it's a house, we'll give you double. If it's just land, we'll give you the full value of your land, but we'll take half the land away. Have a starting point. Bad assumptions, we can figure out what the assumptions. The number on that is about $2 million. Next.
You get the right of way.
To get to basically take the land.
Well, and that's of course presuming that you don't have to go eminent domain. That number would go triple.
Understood.
Yep.
This is just a first cut and simplify assumptions and recognize it's a simple number. Okay, next, project cost estimate. So basically what I did was I looked at the Nature Light Fishway, N6, N7 that were there. I used the numbers that they have for how much excavation would be done, how many tons, how many cubic yards, what were their prices for tons and cubic yards. Be able to figure out from that schematic that I showed you, the side elevation, here's how many yards are gonna have to come out if you're 3, 4, 10 feet, 12 feet wide. So here's how much stuff has to come out. You have a length, how much rock are you gonna have to put in? How much stabilization are you gonna have to put on either side? We come up with a number done in the same format as was done by Interfluke of about $11 million just to dig the fish passage. Just for, that doesn't include 3, 4, 5 million to be able to fix the dam, because the dam's still not fixed. Be able to, we're getting rid of the first license, be able to get rid of that. And then on top of that, doing a whole, go to the next page, doing a whole bunch of fish studies. Because you're creating a new river, you're creating a canal, for lack of a better term.
Yep.
It's the existing river is the existing river. It's been there for millennia. We accept that it's there. It's, God gave it to us, we're taking it. But if you're looking at the other stuff, we're gonna have to basically say, we're creating a whole new canal. We're creating a Panama Canal. We're creating
Which the fish are guaranteed to like.
which the fish have to like. So what we've got is you've got a project that's gonna be 11 to 15, if you can even do it, if you can even get it permitted, if you can even get the properties at a $2 million cost for 20 properties. My bottom line is a bad idea.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
I don't
The
know.
cost, no, no, like,
That's not right.
I don't even
Cost
think
is
the
no-
state would,
Yes.
I don't even think the state would.
Okay, approve it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've thought of this already, but you mentioned sometimes you have to take out 20 feet of dirt. Well, everybody knows that around here, you often don't have to go more than 1 or 2 feet. And you get lead.
Yeah.
Lots of lead.
Then it becomes.
And you guys, you go back to the one that had the red line showing the right of way,
Yeah.
there's already something there. Major sewer collection line is located already underneath the ground at that exact spot. So unless you want to, maybe combine the sewer water with the river water, fish might destroy the nutrients, but.
Yeah.
So again, now in hindsight, when we look at this, we can say to ourselves, this is a bad idea, but I think that's not fair. This is an idea. Somebody came up with it. We tried to take some due diligence and give a first cut at does this make sense or not? And the elevation maps to me show it all different.
I was an observer of the first committee. And I was invited on the field trips. And I went to all but one, and one of them was to go to Howland and see the nature-like fishway there. And the guy that was showing us around, I believe he was from the town office in Howland. I said, boy, this is a major deal. He said, oh, it costs a lot of money. But he said, the only reason that we would go along with a nature-like fishway is that dam out there. And he pointed to the dam that they left in, was producing a lot of electricity.
Right.
So that's a very valuable energy source and source of money.
And today it's producing none.
Yeah, but that's when they figured that, they spent huge money to make that nature-like fishway. And they're gonna have to redo it apparently.
But also, and the reason they have to redo it is because of the attraction issue. The Nature Life Fishway, as I said a few minutes ago, is not it's not attracting the fish, and it's not attracting the fish. I talked with the Fish and Wildlife guy, said, because the old dam is creating pools, and they're going to the pools, and they're actually looking up, they're looking up above saying, oh my God, maybe I can go up, here where the old dam is. And the old dam is what the town at that point, and I was reading some of the articles about it, did not want the dam to come out. So the Nature Life Fishway was a compromise, spending 10, 15, $20 million to be able to get that in.
Which didn't work.
Which didn't work.
So to summarize, okay, number one, we don't own the water to take out of the river.
Correct. That's my.
Number two, at an absolute minimum, you're gonna spend 11 to 13 million versus perhaps $2 million to put the fishway back where the dam is.
To go to that, what do you call it? Vertical slot fishway.
Yeah, $2 million, so we're spending 6 times as much. Number three, the neighbors might object.
I've always wanted waterfront property.
Well, canal front
So,
property.
so have we disclosed of this question?
Yeah.
I could make a motion saying, I move that we do not consider any further work done on the Foxbrook Fishway because it does not make economic sense.
Second.
Second.
All right.
Any other?
Is there any discussion?
Yeah. So discussion,
Has this been presented to the two main proponents that were here, or three, Chad Perkins, Jake and Cheryl, have they?
No, because
It's a shame they're
I
not.
was hoping that we would have a December, and November meeting, a December 3rd meeting, and a December 10th meeting in the other,
Right.
which we didn't have. And that's a shame. I will do that for them and go through that separately. I don't believe the committee should spend necessarily more time on that. Because there are other subjects that I think are.
So-
valuable and have to consider.
Phil, thank you very much for this work. This is, before we take a formal vote on it, just to put this out there, what we had was, it's never a bad idea to have somebody say, well, what if? Would this fix this? Would this do this? Would this do that? And that's all well and fine. And we needed to put this to rest because we don't want to get into this process again and them saying, well, but all you have to do is just get Bubba Joe and his backhoe and we could have this fixed for, I don't know, 20, 30 bucks. And that's what we need to make sure that, so the people that came up with this idea, not casting any aspersions on, they don't think about eminent domain, lasting,
Well,
that's.
in all fairness, we asked everybody to bring their ideas forward.
Yeah,
And
and
we
we
did,
want them,
So-
and that's the thing,
And this is how we prove whether we're.
exactly, and so the idea was fair, I had no idea.
I had no idea.
And I did look at it and say, I don't think the state's gonna permit it because they
Yeah.
don't like to have natural waterways dug up and once. But, this is great work,
No stone unturned.
no stone unturned.
Exactly.
It was not a dumb question or a dumb suggestion to make. It made perfect sense. The elevation drop from the start to the finish was there, so it passed the sniff test. It just did not pass the engineering test.
This is good work, Bill. I mean, we're lucky to have somebody who does that. I wish you were working for the town or, because a lot of towns, boards don't even have anybody that can do this. Be this transparent, simplify this for the voters. I know you're retired, but this is good work.
Well,
Wish we were doing it for everything else, but.
he is working for the town.
Hang on, we're about to take a vote, but Jane,
Yeah, I have a question. So, Bill, how much do you charge an hour?
Do this for everything,
I'm
Bill.
serious. To me, you need to track your in-kind contribution.
I do this because I am civically minded and I want the best for this town.
I understand.
And-
but some
and-
people need to see a figure. So hence my question. You charge $75 an hour in kind? Is that the low ball?
The answer to the question is, if somebody came and said, Bill, I need you for a couple hours, my LLC charges $25 an hour, but I don't take on a lot of jobs.
okay, so we've got a proposal that, Alcina, did you have the wording written down?
It's all recorded.
Oh, it's all recorded, right? Okay,
That's your notes. Between now and then, I'll visit with the folks.
oh, we haven't voted yet.
Oh,
We have to vote.
So we had a first and a second on basically dispensing with the idea that there's an
Alternative fish,
alternative
Foxbrook
fish
fish.
the Foxbrook Fishway. So all in favor of dispensing with that? Yeah, okay. Thank you again, Bill. This is
Yes.
fantastic.
We'll talk to them.
Yeah, and even if you're off by a factor of 10, it's.
Now, are we, thinking about, we need a meeting in January, at least one meeting in January.
Yes.
Okay,
I would say more than one.
I see it
Oh,
working, I see it working like this. Between now and then, I'll visit with the Atlantic Salmon Federation.
I would like to be there. If Sandy's available, I'd love to have her.
Yeah.
Bill and Sandy and I will visit with the Atlantic Salmon Federation. Two, Sandy, we should visit about what we can do to get started on the
Yes.
funding or lack thereof. So we're coming prepared for that.
Yep.
Three, if I send out this thing with an extra column for each of you to put in your own number that you think is different than this one, and we collected these, we can collectively end up with what we think is a low estimate. Does that make sense?
I would just do a percentage because I don't have the
no clue.
expertise.
Yeah.
I think that,
Okay, then we can agree on a percentage next
Mhm.
week.
yeah,
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. To my mind, what we need to do next meeting is, one, how we get the word out. That stands alone.
Yeah.
Right? Two, agree on the agenda for that meeting. Right? And three, figure out how we're gonna present this thing.
yes.
Somebody's gonna have to stand up and do this.
Yeah.
Figure out how to do that. And then, of course, the meat of this is making this look pretty or useful. Although I'm not sure we want to take much detail off of that, frankly.
Yeah, and then,
You do what when we were working on it, you compress it down and then you blow it out as people start to understand the numbers.
That's exactly right.
exactly
So
right.
we need to get that organized. Can we do this in one meeting and then just wait until February for our extra
No.
meeting?
why don't we do
looking for
this?
two?
Why don't we plan on 2 meetings? We'll go early in January for our first meeting.
Area.
See how it goes, and then we can tidy up with a second meeting. I don't think we need any more than 2. So why don't we look at the first full week of January, that's January 6th through the 10th. Does anybody have any particular night conflicts?
I am currently my wife is currently being treated in Portland for having chemotherapy, so Monday, Tuesday are bad for me.
Okay, then let's try for Wednesday seems to generally work.
Not for me.
Wednesday's good.
Not for you, Chris. So let's look at Thursday.
We have a planning board meeting that night.
What time is your planning board meeting?
6:30.
6:30.
Okay.
If we could meet at 5-ish,
Yeah, David probably would, he
Be a little
would
late.
be coming late.
if we could meet at 5, go till 6:30,
Yeah,
that at least gets us started.
I think we can get a lot done in an hour and a half. Yeah, and it would be better to do it that week at an hour and a half than to skip into the next week and do it for 3.
Agreed.
So, yeah, why don't we do for 5?
So 5 o'clock, what day?
That would be
Midnight. Thursday, the 9th. What's the second Wednesday?
all right. We've already been bitten once by Mother Nature, so I would say that to play it on the safe side, I would recommend that we would look at the very next week. And just think that one or the other of those might get screwed up by the weather.
Okay, which leaves us.
Now, the week of the 13th, I'm available on Tuesday. Is that the week of the 13th?
Yes, the week.
I'm available then on Tuesdays if you want to move back to Tuesday.
Yes.
Tuesday?
So the 14th,
Yep.
and that would be our second meeting of the month, or that's our fallback?
No, this would be the second.
Okay.
So
good.
basically, if we lose the first one or we lose the second one, we're gonna have a third date somewhere, which we will plan at that time.
Okay, great. But right now, we're gonna go because I'm gone after the
Yeah,
18th.
five
Yeah.
seems to work. I mean, David will be a little bit late, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, that was very good.
I have some new business when you get.
You have new business. Why don't you, I think we're at new business now.
Okay, I'm going to give to you, I did not make enough copies for everybody. I'm going to give to Alcina, so she has a copy. In doing the work for looking at Foxbrook, doing the work for looking at these costs that are associated with the work we have to do. I became extremely concerned. So some of my concerns relate to, and Chris is allayed, one of the concerns is we have to create not a, hey, we're gonna need 6 million, 7 million, whatever the number is, go to the town says no, and we're at middle of June, or middle of March or whatever, and we've already committed to FERC to come back and say, we're gonna, we have June 25th, that's when we're gonna have the information, the other things that are dealing with it. So we have also as a town, as in looking at the FERC information or FERC website on the filings that have gone in for the dam that is there. The town has basically been pushing FERC off for
10 years?
20 years.
20 years.
And if you look at the details, the last 10 to 12 years, the town has pushed off FERC and repeatedly, for all, other than the safety plan, ignored FERC saying, you need to do this, 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 and this. So when we first started the committee meetings, I said, we really need to understand what non-compliance means. We have to have a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
And the only person that's going to give us that is the town lawyer. So I say, first one is basically, town lawyer provides the dam committee an opinion of the consequences of not complying with the FERC findings and follow-up actions.
Yes.
Identified in the FERC dam safety inspection of August 3rd, 2023.
People need to know that.
That is an important part that when we go to the public, we've got to tell them, oh, by the way, if you do nothing, we have a serious problem here. I would not want to be the person signing the letter in June to FERC asking for another
No,
extension.
I agree with this, but I think what we're angling for is to have this 100% put to rest, the special town meeting prior to that.
And in the and I understand and I respect what you're saying. I want to be negative Nancy here, even though my name is Bill. That we need to really be able to tell the people the
Oh,
consequences.
I still think we should go.
Okay, so my first motion is the town provide the town lawyer provide the dam committee an opinion of the consequences of not complying with the findings and follow-up actions identified in the FERC dam safety inspection of August 3rd, 2023. Any second?
Does that have to go
Second.
front of the board for approval?
Well, I don't think we need to do a formal vote. I would say on this whole thing, let's make a recommendation. The motion I would be looking for is
Make a recommendation.
recommendation that we pass this on and have the town
Select board.
to the select board.
Okay.
The select board would then consider this and basically empower the lawyer to do all of this.
So now the second part of this is one of the issues that FERC brought out in their August 3rd, 2023 work was you need to get an outside independent contractor, independent engineering firm to come in and look at the dam and tell us, do a dam safety stability analysis. And that was recommended in 2015. That was recommended, except for the last 10 years. Well, that was finally done with dam committee, under dam committee 1 with Gomez and Sullivan. There is a specific recommendation in there that we need to do the stabilization. FERC doesn't know about that yet. Okay, that just be aware, FERC does not know about that. So we need to understand from the town lawyer, are we required to do what is, my assumption is yes, but I'm not a lawyer. Are we required? The town lawyer provides dam committee with an opinion on what remedial actions listed in Gomez and Sullivan report of August 24, 2023, with the issues, with the report issued in October 2023. Do we need to fulfill the actions, specifically their finding number 6, which is we need to stabilize the dam because the dam is unsafe, it will uplift.
I like this because now you're getting into the nitty gritty of what legally.
What do we have to
So
do?
that could cut costs if we don't have to do everything.
So my understanding of the law, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't have a degree in it, but my understanding from the work I've done with contracts is because it was part of FERC's recommendations back in August 3rd and their report, that you get an independent engineering firm to come in, tell you about the stability of the dam, which they came back and said, it doesn't meet FERC stability standards, you have to fix this.
Yeah, so it's the time frame to get it fixed.
Time frame to get it fixed.
Yep.
Now, we could technically, if we're playing, looking at the scheduling, we could put that off at different timing, say, well, first we're gonna get the ones listed in the FERC. FERC's gonna come back in August of 2028 and say, oh, you've got to do this too, because that was part of the report. We need to be proactive.
Yeah, exactly.
Next one. So all those in favor?
Well, this is gonna be,
You're gonna go to the okay,
we'll
second.
just do the whole.
Third one, town lawyer provides dam committee with a list of all state and federal regulatory agencies and contacts within the agency that have jurisdiction on any or all parts of the FERC license, the dam that is there. Now, we have a listing that came back in an email saying, hey, oh, by the way, you're gonna have to look at fish and wildlife. There are other agencies that weren't in that I know about from my readings that I've done. But again, I'm not a lawyer. We're gonna have to be contacting all of those people. They are all gonna be interveners in this process. We need to start proacting. If we are going to now surrender the license, we need to be able to start proacting and knowing who we're gonna have to go to, how we're gonna then manage that overhead cost of surrendering the FERC license, because we got nobody doing it for us. It's all up to us. Okay. Everybody understand that, what I'm looking at?
Yeah.
Okay, next one. I keep talking about the biological studies. Biological studies have been done. There was a toss-off comment, I believe in Kleinschmidt, saying, well, there's a lot known about, or somebody in recent, I've read so much stuff. There's so much that's known about it, you don't really have to worry. We could maybe cookie cutter a biological assessment, a BA or an EA.
Yeah.
You can't. So town lawyer consequences if we don't comply with fish passage of Atlantic salmon. And so we come back, we want to know what are the consequences of that. Second thing we need to do is we need to get an RFQ, a request for proposals, RFP, to be able to go and get an outside consultant to come in and start walking us through this fish passage issue. Now, an RFP doesn't cost you anything because you're asking somebody to come in and say, I'm kind of spitballing with 200, 250,000 or 100,000 for a fish passage study. It may be 50,000. So, but that's going to be a critical piece when we talk about, hey, Bill, you had the number of this for the studies that you want to do, and the number is double that. We need to start to have an idea of filling that piece in, because that's going to be a huge piece. That's where we are going to have people fighting at our feet. They're going to be nipping at our heels saying, hey, fish issue, you got a big problem here. You're going to have to do this, this, and this. These are the interveners. And some of those interveners are going to be people like the Atlantic Salmon Federation.
Yeah.
So that's the other one, put out an RFP for a salmon or a fish study focusing on endangered species, which means focusing on salmon. The next one, we need an opinion about the requirements for water and water quality before we can surrender the FERC license. It's like a relicensing process. We've got to prove that the water quality in that area is satisfactory and that the dam is satisfactory. I live, as Sandy does, my apartment I live in, I can look at the river. My wife is probably the only person in this town that has swum in that river in the last 5 years, and she has done it repeatedly. But every time we're there in the summertime and we're looking at it, and I fished in it and other people have gone out fishing, best thing you get in the summertime is, maybe a sunfish about that big. If you look out at the river itself, what are you going to see constantly? Bubbles. That's methane bubbling up, rotting. Because there are no fish in the river at that time of year because the temperature is too high and because the water quality is terrible. So we need to be able to go out and we're going to have to do a water quality study. We may not be able to keep the dam in because once a water quality study is done, because we're surrendering the FERC license and it has to be done, we may not be able to present the town with the option of keeping the dam. Because the dam, the only reason it's there now and hasn't been regulated is because it had an exemption. And if you went today with that dam to try and put it in and get an exemption for it, that was done in 1982, 83, under Moosehead, you'd never get it. It never happened. So we need to understand water quality and fish passage. We're gonna eat our lunch.
Bill.
What?
Doing this bites heavily into lines 33, 34, and 35.
That's where, yeah, we don't know those numbers.
Basically, I can say from personal experience, this is regulatory compliance where John Cottle doesn't do that work.
No, you would have to
Find
find.
somebody that does.
The point is, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves in terms of our February meeting.
But
If the town stands and says, no, don't go ahead. And, we've got a good start on this. We will have expended a fair amount of money and time. The
You-
RFP's free, agreed.
the RP is free. The lawyer time, yes, there will be lawyer time, but we're looking at the high level. We're not looking at the lawyer going in and digging out the detail. Plus, if we are gonna surrender the FERC license, even if you take the dam out, if you're gonna surrender the license to keep the dam that's there, and people, you're gonna have to get started on knowing what that path is and how we're gonna maneuver through it.
These are-
I just make, sorry.
These are things that kind of have to be done, whether you vote to keep the dam, you move the dam, you still have to do certain things. And yes, get forward on, get moving on that.
And it's gonna take, these aren't gonna happen in a week, and you're not gonna spend the money in the next 2-3 months, say, even for the lawyers.
The motion is to put this to the select
Select
board.
board.
Yeah.
And I'm in favor of that, yeah. But I
Second.
make a strong copy.
All right, so we're gonna have a formal. You're making the proposal, Tracy is seconding it. The discussion portion of it, I'll just to make sure everybody's on the same page. We're recommending to the select board that they do these things, get these things started now. And that, because the work basically will need to be done in some form or another, regardless of what happens. So, all right, any more discussion? All in favor? Thank you very much.
Sorry, they've talked.
No.
I talk fast.
Very educational. Bill.
Yes, you talk well.
Now, for outreach, just real quick, if people want, this is what Alcina and I put together, talking about what are the options for outreach? What are the things we can do for outreach?
Okay,
You
we're
can-
gonna, yeah,
Separately.
we'll look this over for the next meeting. Because that will be the core of our next meeting. The first one, yeah, the first meeting.
If anybody else wants a copy.
Thank you,
Did
Bill
we
and
want-
Alcina.
Did we want a third date?
You can, why don't we do our first one
Okay,
and see how people's,
Yeah.
see how it goes. If we, the first one, we should at least know what the second one's weather might look like.
okay.
If it says blizzard, we'll go right for the third day.
Good idea. Is the February 4th meeting posted on the website? And Sean, have you posted it on yours?
I have not.
No,
Okay,
it's
so-
tentatively held because we were sure.
Yeah, we didn't have an
actually
exact
the
date, right?
Yeah,
Is it too soon to get it posted?
if that's the date we're going with.
Yeah, I think so. Earlier is better than later.
Yeah.
That's probably about practically as early as we
Was
can
that
get.
when we have a hearing?
Yeah.
The public meeting.
Yeah, public meeting.
That should be a firm date out.
Yeah, I would say so. Get that on.
The requirements, so how many days that to be posted?
Oh, it's just 2 weeks. I mean, yeah. So we're
But,
way ahead of that.
okay, I'm happy.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna conclude our regular meeting. Any comments from the public? Excellent. Let's go get some supper. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, tonight we finished it.